All right, I think we are live. So welcome everyone to another live Q&A here that we've been doing on a weekly basis now. Been having a blast the past few weeks with these, and looking forward to doing another one here with you guys today. So I hope you're all having a good weekend here. Hope you had a good St. Patrick's Day on Friday. And so like all the other live streams here, it's going to go for about 2 hours or so, hopefully. And I'll be giving priority answering to anyone who does super chats or is a member of the channel. And otherwise, we'll just go through and talk cars and answer the questions you guys have here. So yeah, I'm glad to see some of you already joined in here. We'll wait for a few others to join. Hopefully you guys, are looking forward to having a good week here. I'm going to be doing a trip to film the Hyundai Ioniq 6 this week. So that's going to be a fun one. And that embargo lifts early April. So stay tuned for that. But so that's what I'll be up to this week. But yeah, so also looks like the lighting's pretty good in here, but I strangely had the light bulb in my office burn out, so I'm using a substitute bulb. I don't know about you guys, random non-car thing, but I buy these LED bulbs, like assuming that they're, they market them as like lasting longer than, regular light bulbs. But I feel like this thing's only been in here for 2 years at most, and it's already dead. And I'm like, man, it's like worse than a regular light bulb for these LED ones that they say are going to last you 50 years or whatever. It's kind of funny. But anyway, yeah. So I see we have a few people here have joined. So BT Aurora, thank you. He says, thank you for your live chat and weekly update. Thanks for joining in. Hopefully you enjoyed the weekly update this week, and all the car news there is pretty interesting. I'm fascinated by the Ioniq 5N and their experimentation with all these new things to make electric vehicles a little more interesting. We'll see how it works in reality. I see VQ 25D TT is here as well, and says Ioniq 6 kind of growing on me. I absolutely hated the looks of it when it first came out. Yeah, I saw it in person at the LA Auto Show back in the fall, and I still don't love the looks. I think it's just that strip in the front bumper. Like if someone, can just paint that over, body color match that, or even just if there's any kind of body kits someday that are available for them, I think that would really help a lot. Because otherwise, I think it looks, pretty good for the most part. But again, any of these vehicles where they're trying to go for super aerodynamic proportions, it's always a little odd. Same thing with the Mercedes stuff, you kind of sacrifice some of the styling, I think, with that goal, and so it's interesting. I'll wait to see it again and actually see it in natural light outside this week and see if it's growing on me anymore or change. But I'm still like, maybe the end version, whenever that comes, that'll maybe win me over with the styling a little bit more. But I'm so glad that they're doing an electric sedan, since that's something aside from the Tesla and a couple others that are starting to slowly show up on the scene. There's really not a whole lot in the sedan segment, so I'm really glad that Hyundai is going for that. I see OC Cabby also says hi from Greens from New Jersey. Thanks for joining. I see we have the first member that has joined in here. So Omar, thank you so much for joining and being a member. He says, Matt, in your opinion, will there be a more affordable Gen 6 Mustangs used inventory with the release of the new Mustang? So good question. Yeah, about S550s and whether they're going to be a little more common. I don't know. I mean, I think that there will probably inevitably be some type of bump in used inventory on S550s, primarily just because there will be some people that are upgrading. And I've even seen I'm a member of the Bullet Facebook page on Facebook there, and I think there's a few people that are like getting ready to upgrade to a S650, and so I'm guessing there's a decent amount of people that are excited about it. But I know there are also a lot of people that really love their current Mustangs, and it's the whole thing where everyone resists the new style for a few years, then everyone ends up going and buying it anyway, myself included probably, although I don't think I'm going to get a new one no matter what. But yeah, so we'll see. I don't know if it's all going to come at once though. It might be a slow burn as far as those used Mustangs showing up, but there will certainly be a few, I'm sure, whenever the new ones start hitting the lots here, and hopefully that will make them a little more affordable for those of you looking to get into them. And Avery, thank you so much for joining and being a member here. He says, what's up, Matt? And so I see we have a couple other questions here. Marcus says, is Jaguar making cars still? They are. I know. I actually do see Jaguar commercials every once in a while, but you would think that it's a little, it's almost like they have gone out of the States, but at least here in my area, I'm seeing a ton of Jags all the time. So I'm very well aware that they're still existing and making cars. But yeah, Jaguar is still very much a brand in the United States, and still continuing on with their lineup. Although there's not going to be much new from Jag until I think they said 2025 at the earliest. So they're not in great shape, but they are continuing on. And Blooper Reel is asking, did I get to drive the dual motor Aria? I did not. I was not invited. I'm not usually on Nissan's list. It was kind of a shock when I got invited to the Nissan Z last year. But I've never been on another Nissan event since then, and before then either. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'll get one as a press vehicle here once they're in the fleet. I'm not sure when they'll be showing up, but I'm probably going to cover the Aria. That was another one I was a little up in the air. Some of these EVs I'm kind of passing on because I know there's limited interest in those on this channel. So it's something I'm a little, sorry, there's this like cat hair that's floating in the air. But yeah, there's limited interest in those. So, Nissan SUVs do terrible on my channel. So I'm a little iffy about the Aria, but I think being fast, hopefully that will appeal to some of you and make it a little worthwhile to film. So I'll probably do the dual motor Aria. I'm not going to do the single motor one though. And Dom says he just saw an EV Jag. Oh, that's, yeah, the I-Pace. That's awesome. I see one of those every once in a while. For a while there, they were giving those things away. The lease deals, I think it's like an 80 grand car. And I was seeing lease deals for like $550 a month or something, which is insanely cheap for a car that expensive. So yeah, I'm sure that's not in effect anymore, but for a while there, they were really trying to push them hard, no matter what the cost. But thanks for joining also in the live stream here, Dom. Hope you're having a good day as well. And Omar says, speaking of Jaguar, what happened to the brand Cougar? My dad had one in the early 90s. Do you mean the Mercury Cougar? Because I don't know of a brand called Cougar. So yeah, if there is a brand called Cougar, then you've stumped me. It's one of the few vehicle brands I don't know about here, at least in the States. But anyway, yeah, I think Mercury Cougars, I think they quit making those like 2002 or 2003. That was it. And other questions here. So I see Greg's excited about the Ioniq 6. He takes 2 road trips a year, 1,000-mile trips each. Yeah, if you're doing road trips and you can't afford a Taycan or one of those other, the Audi e-tron, those are the only ones that charge a tiny bit faster, I think. But otherwise, the Ioniq and the any of the Ioniqs and the Kias, any of that stuff on that 800-volt architecture, that is the way to go for road tripping for sure. If you're going to do a lot of that, Tesla's of course also a good choice, but if you don't want a Tesla or a Porsche, yeah, the Hyundai and the Kia have the best solution for road trippers right now. So I see Ray says, do you want to buy my #1 MSRP only spot for a GR Corolla Circuit Edition? I do not. Yeah, I briefly tossed around the idea of, getting a GR Corolla. Every time one of these new hot cars comes out, just like every other YouTuber, I'm like, maybe I should do a content series on that and then flip it and, get rid of it, after a year or something. But, for me, I don't drive enough. I don't even have enough time to drive the Bullet. So driving another vehicle to try and do like a ownership experience thing with it these days is just something that's unrealistic for me with how many press cars I have to drive all the time. First world problems, but, just for me, it's hard. So yeah, a GR Corolla would just sit in the garage if I ever bought one. And yeah, it's a fun car. It's just for my current position in life right now, it's just not something that, I need, even though it'd be fun to have for sure. Omar is saying, yeah, he was talking about Mercury for the Cougar. Yeah, they're long gone, unfortunately. It'd be cool if they brought back even the Cougar. I know they probably can't bring back Mercury no matter what, but it'd be fun to see a Cougar. And that also would have been a great name to put on the Mach-E instead of calling it the Mustang. They had a whole long list of really cool names Ford could have used. I'm never going to get over the naming thing. Yes, I bought one still, but I mean, I still wish they would have called it anything other than a Mustang. But it's a good car, so that's why we got it. But Sato Crypto says, any plans in upgrading the Bullet? No plans. This is something I considered back whenever I first got it. I even had, what was the company? I think there was a company that I think was Roush that offered me a free supercharger for the Bullet, and I even turned that down. A free supercharger, which I know a lot of you probably want to slap me in the face for that, but didn't want to do a supercharger on it. I drove a supercharged one. I actually did a quick drive video on a supercharged Bullet just to see, like, hey, is this something I wanted to try? But I wanted it to be reliable. I didn't want to mess with tuning it, messing with it, because that was one thing I think I went too far out of my comfort zone with the EcoBoost, and it really stressed me out. So I wanted to make sure that I kept the Bullet reliable stock. And I know they can be reliable, even with a supercharger. I mean, that dude in blue has shown how, his with the supercharger was reliable for a long time. But just not for me. I'm not super into the modification scene anymore. And that's why I love the Bullet, is that it did all the things that I would have wanted to do if I had a vehicle that didn't have the things the Bullet has, like, the active exhaust, I mean, that gets rid of the need, in my opinion, for an exhaust on them, because to me, the loud mode is loud enough. And then I have the normal mode for whenever I don't want to, be waking every neighbor. And then I got the quiet mode whenever I need to sneak out of the house and not wake the baby. So, it has all the bases covered. Same thing with the magnetized suspension on the Bullet. If I want a super stiff ride, I don't need to swap out springs or dampers. I just have the magnetic dampers. I flip a switch and it goes, a little bit stiffer on me. And then you soften it up whenever you're cruising around. You don't want to, be flying around. You just want a comfy cruiser. You got that. So it kind of, to me, with all these new electronics and all the adjustments, it kind of gets rid of the need for a lot of mods that I would do the basic stuff. Like my BRZ was too quiet. I had to put an exhaust on it. These days with the active exhaust and stuff, it means it's, something personally I don't feel the need to do. So no mods to the Bullet. I am going to be out of the powertrain warranty this year. So that can kind of go both ways, where I want to be a little extra careful because I now have no coverage after July on, the engine, but it also means that I don't have to worry about voiding any kind of powertrain warranty anymore. So I do have that flexibility and I don't have to feel quite as bad if I was going to, mess around with stuff. But just to me, and I know everyone's different, but to me, if I did stuff to the Bullet, it would diminish it to me, and it would ruin it slightly, because I think it's perfect just the way it is, honestly. Greg says the only thing missing is the twin turbo kit. Yeah, that'd be fun. It's fun for others. It's twin turbos and stuff like that. It's like a lot of other things where it's fun to sample, and it's fun to see other people have that stuff, but it's one of those things that I personally don't feel the need to have. So it's just personal preference, but yeah, no mods for the Bullet. Let me see. So Dom's asking, did it have to be installed? If you're talking about the supercharger, I think, they're just going to send me the supercharger and I'd have to figure out, installing it and all that. Thank you so much for joining. He says, hey Matt, how are you doing? I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well as well. I hope you guys are all having a good weekend here so far. It's been a little bit of a wild one. The baby hasn't been sleeping great. And it was yesterday was a little bit of a dramatic day for us, but thankfully everything's nice and even keel today for a change. So that's nice. You also think I should put a supercharger on the Bullet. Yeah, it's a hard pass. I know it would definitely be good for the channel and be good for videos, but messing with the Bullet is just one thing I'm not willing to do for the channel. Unfortunately, it's just one thing. I bought that car for me, not for content, and I just love it too much to potentially screw it up, in my opinion. And Omar says, mod question, can the 2016 Mustang hood with directional turn signals be added to a 2019 Bullet? Bummer they only did it for that year. That's a good question, actually. I think I remember looking into it. I think what I originally, because that was one of the fun little things that I do miss from my 2016 GT. I love those turn signal hood vents. I'm so sad I got rid of them. As far as whether you could put that hood on, you could certainly swap that hood on. My concern is that, the GTs, I don't think those vents, maybe they were functional, but they weren't as functional as the 2018 and beyond. That hood had a longer, wider vent, and it's lower. And so the problem is, in the Bullet, I can't see the hood vents anymore. So when they changed the hood, they lowered the hood, and they kind of took some cues from the GT350 with the 2018 refresh. You can't see the vents anymore. So that's also part of why I don't know why they got rid of it for 2017, but for 2018, it's just so you can't see them. So it'd be cool if some dude sitting in a lifted truck next to you is looking over and you have it on. But other than that, I could never see it. So that's the only thing. And raising that hood up, I guess you could do if you put an old hood on. But with the Bullet, it actually has an open air box that is hooked up to that scoop. And so messing with the location of that scoop would probably, not be worth doing, because you want to make sure you get enough air to that, the air filter. So yeah, don't think there's any way I could do that. I did look into, I think there are companies that do offer some type of little LED bar you can put in your existing scoop and do something like that. But again, if I can't really see it, then it kind of makes it, a pointless thing to do, unfortunately. But I assume, to answer your question, theoretically, you could probably swap hoods. But I don't think it would be, a good idea, potentially. And Dom says he loves the more frequent lives. I'm glad you're enjoying them, Dom, and thanks for joining in here. And Vinzer said he came back from India this Friday and enjoyed the trip. Wanted to go back so badly. Feels so cold here in Toronto. I'm sure that's quite the change. I'm sure I've never been to India, but I'm sure it seems like it's nice and warm even this time of year, probably. So that's awesome. You were able to make the trip, though. That's really, really cool. And Yeah, it'd be a fun place to visit for sure someday. It's surprising. It'd be fun to see car makers be a little more diverse with the places they do press trips. Yeah, there are some companies that do international, events, but very rarely do they step outside of the, typical touristy kind of places in Europe. And it'd be fun to see them be a little more, daring with where they go. But Dom says, is it late to get a bullet for a decent price? I love how versatile it is, and I have a very similar preference to you. Um, I don't know. The bullet prices, they seem to be all over the place with how, I mean, like anything with used car markets yo-yoing back and forth all the time. And so, I saw they got to their cheapest, back when everyone was freaking out at the beginning of COVID and dumping their cars and stuff. And I think the cheapest I saw them get down to for like a nice one, somewhere to mine was like 38 grand. Now it seems like they've come up a little bit. The used market is still softened in the past few months, but now it's starting to come back up a little bit. So I think now my car is worth roughly 42-ish or so. I mean, I'd still say I think what you're going to see is that the prices, and this goes back to what Omar was asking about a little bit earlier, with the prices on used S550s, I think they'll actually stay pretty stable, even if there is an influx of trade-ins, because now you're faced with, okay, I can go for a bullet, or I can go for, a used Mach 1 or anything else from the S550 generation, have pretty close to the same amount of power as the new one. And again, if the looks are a little controversial for some people still, I think, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, wow, I can get a bullet for 42 that also has 480 horsepower versus the new one having, 485, I think, with the active exhaust is what they're quoting now. 5 horsepower. I mean, come on, it's the Mustang world. You can get 5 horsepower, by walking past the thing basically and just putting $10 in mods into it essentially, So, I mean, I think that, even bullet prices could go up if people are like, wow, well, why would I get a dark horse for 60 grand if I'm lucky enough to get it for MSRP? And with options, you're looking at 70, or you can save, what is that, 40% and get a car with, 20 less horsepower. Obviously, the dark horse has other stuff and it's more like a performance pack level too. But just, speaking in rough, loose terms here, I think the S550s are actually going to hold their value because people are like, I'm just going to, buy a Mustang for what Mustangs used to cost before all this, madness with inflation and stuff, and just go for, an S550 and still a very, very cool, fun car for, 30, 40, even 50 grand. It's going to probably be a savings, So, yeah, we'll see. It's interesting. But I mean, it's one of those things, Dom, as far as when to time stuff, I always just live in the now. If it's something you can afford and you want it and it's worth that price to you, and this goes for any car, go for it and enjoy it. And, unless it's something is going to just bomb and just depreciate immediately. Other than that, buy something, enjoy it. And as long as you can afford it, don't worry too much about the resale, in my opinion, which might be stupid, but that's how I always looked at it, because tomorrow's never guaranteed. I'd rather, get something and have fun with it while I can. So Omar says, I feel like the Mustang used market will have the same fate as the 370 and the new Z, where none really went down in price. Interesting. I didn't keep an eye on the 370Z market, but it's interesting to hear they didn't go down. But yeah, same exact logic. Yeah, where if you can't touch a new Z on the showroom floor for less than 80 grand or something, then it's like, all right, well, yeah, 370Z, I can live without the turbo motor and, still have a fun car from Nissan, and that's it, and you save yourself a ton of money. Dom says, thank you. What's your second choice? What's something a little cheaper that performs similar that's not a Stang? Camaro. I love the Camaros. They're fantastic. This generation didn't get enough credit. They didn't sell as well as I think they should have. I think, honestly, aside from visibility, it's objectively a better car than the Mustang. For me, it's just, the personal preference of the Mustang and the bullet connection and all that. And, I think the Mustang does some things better in addition to the visibility. I think the interior setup a little bit better, but a lot of these things are subjective. But from an objective car reviewer standpoint, the Camaro is the better driving car, in my opinion. I mean, unless you enjoy the high red lines. So again, it always still goes back to being subjective. This is why I don't do blanket ratings on cars. But if the Mustang didn't exist, Camaro would be another really strong, suggestion that I would say if you're looking for something similar. Also, Supra is another solid second choice that I've always loved as well if I was going to spend similar money. But I think Supras are also not coming down in price. It seems like they're still pretty solidly in the high 40s last I saw. So those aren't really coming down. But Camaros, I feel like, probably do depreciate a little bit just because there's not a whole lot new with them. And again, they don't get as much love as the Mustangs do. Alexander Mills Sr., thank you for joining the live stream as always. Says, did you look into that Kia Hyundai theft thing and regulars to their prices rapidly dropping? So I have been hearing about, yeah, the whole thing of them, getting, what is it? You put like a USB stick in or something and that unlocks and allows you to, start the car or something, some hack. I think that they did patch that. I thought I read that they did do a fix for that because, I mean, there was insurance brands that were not covering, those cars anymore because it was so easy to steal them and people were getting them stolen left and right. And I was talking to someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone said like their rental. Oh, it was actually, I think, yeah, when I was on the Dodge Hornet event 2 weeks ago, I was talking to a Dodge executive they said that they had rented, I think it was a Kia, and it got stolen from them too. So it's like, apparently it's always kind of been a thing, but I think TikTok really made it a thing. And so that's why they're like, okay, well now we can't sweep this under the rug. We gotta, make sure that we fix this. And so I think that has been fixed. I don't know. I haven't been following it too closely, but I believe that they have put out a fix for that. Yavinder says, what are your thoughts on Infiniti as a brand? Do you think Infiniti lost its value? Well, I think the thing with Infiniti is maybe if you look at it from an MSRP standpoint, they have maybe lost the bargain value kind of, perspective on them, but they do go for under MSRP. They're one of the few brands that seems to, offer discounts a little more liberally than some of the others. And so, I think if you're willing to shop around and you are okay with haggling and you're not just turned off by the MSRP, I think you can get a good deal on an Infiniti and bring back that value proposition. I think Infiniti, though, they have promise. I mean, I think Nissan has solid products, and I thought Infiniti was great. I think the Q50 drives great. I just did a new follow-up video on that a few months back. Q60, I thought was one of the most gorgeous looking coupes on the market for a while. They make some good stuff, and it's just unfortunate that they haven't been able to keep it fresh. And but they have been doing some marketing here with the QX60. I've been seeing some commercials for it and stuff. So I think Infiniti's just struggling, but the luxury brands, a lot of them struggle unless you are a Mercedes, BMW, or Audi. All the others struggle. They're all trying to fight for their spot and trying to, convince people they're premium, they're worth the money, and trying to carve out this niche beneath all the German stuff. And it's just tough, I think, for all of them. But I think Infiniti has promise. It sounds like from the interviews they've done with their executives that they have, they're committed to the brand. They're going to invest a ton of money and, have it be, again, some new products coming in, make it more and more impressive. And I hope that they do, I guess, become more popular. But at least around here, especially, a lot of the soccer moms and just random people that need family haulers, they're still going out and getting the old QX60s. I mean, they did some good lease deals on those a while back, and I see a decent amount of Infinitis around here. It helps that we did have an Infiniti dealer pretty close up until about a year or two ago. But they're fairly common, at least around here. I don't know how it is in the rest of the country, but I see Omar says, I agree to many non-car people's Camaros have a more appealing look. Mustangs feels like they stick to the traditional pony car look. Definitely true, but then, I think Camaro went too bold with the styling on, this most recent one, and especially after the refresh, they made it even worse. And I think that really hurt it now. I think looking back, this new generation, I think they actually aged pretty well and they look really good here currently, but then when they did that refresh here, I don't know, just to me, it made it much worse. And it's unfortunate because it's a really good car, but now getting the new one, you got to do something on the front end because it's just still a little iffy to me. But again, that's styling and subjective. Everyone's opinions are different on that. Bruce, thank you so much also for joining the live stream here. He says, hey, Matt, what are the best and worst things about driving manual transmission cars? The best things, the engagement, the control, the fun of it. The worst is, sitting in traffic, not being totally smooth all the time, and the extra skill and attention that takes to be smooth and not stall. And then depending on the tech of your manual, if you don't have auto rev matching and stuff like that, really mastering that can be really rewarding, but it also can be kind of frustrating depending on your personality and how much you enjoy working on new skills and all that. But I'd say it's overall, really fun experience. And I mean, I was hooked ever since I was a teenager. I mean, it was kind of a cool thing back then as well, but I really fell in love with it. And every single car I've personally bought for myself, now the Mach-E and Beth's cars in the past are withstanding. But other than those, everything else that I've ever bought has been a manual. Everything I get is a manual, and I love that. But there's a lot of great automatics out there too, though. But manual still is just, I don't know, to me, I like having that extra control. And I love the fact that if the car isn't giving me the performance I want, I can do something to change that. Instead of with automatics, yeah, you can go and do the paddles, but by the time you mess with all that, it's usually a little bit slower. Like, I like that you know what to anticipate, you know what to expect with the manual. With the automatics, sometimes it's a little bit of a guessing game. And Angel says the other benefit is it's less likely to be stolen. Very true. It's now the anti-theft device, because a lot of these thieves were not taught manual, and so that's another thing as well that makes it harder to steal for sure. So let me see here. I know we've been getting some other questions. Sato Crypto is also asking any news on the new Miata. I haven't heard anything yet. Christoph says, have you ever come to Poland? I wish I could drink with you the Polish vodka. Thanks for joining all the way from Poland. That's awesome. I would love to have some Polish vodka with you if I ever make a trip there. I do have, my last name is Polish, and I have my grandparents are not from Poland, but they, originally, I think their grandparents were from Poland. So several generations removed from Poland, but I'd love to go to Poland someday and see what it's all about. It seems like a beautiful country. And other questions here. Lil Danny says, with the ridiculous dealer markup on the 2023 Golf R, would you say a 2018 to 2020 RS3 would be a better deal in the mid to high 50 grand range? Yeah, if this is the thing with anything with a dealer markup. If there's something else that's cooler, that's not super old, and you're not having to take that much of a mileage hit on it, 100%. I mean, this is the same thing. And even with new cars, I was seeing some people saying, I really wanted a Civic Si, but then Integras weren't marked up, but Civic SIs were, so that closed that performance gap. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you only have to pay an extra $2,000 for the Integra, get the nicer interior of the Integra, versus the $7,000 difference it's supposed to be with the way the manufacturers set it up. And so same thing with, if all the dealers that you're encountering are not willing to deal on a Golf R, and you can't get it for 46, 47, whatever, then 100% go for an RS3. I mean, way more exciting motor. You get the extra luxury, the extra, refinement a little bit there, the extra prestige, if that's something you're interested in. But I mean, you just get it for the motor. 100%. I would totally rather have a 2018 to 2020 RS3 over a brand new Golf R any day, all day, unless you must have the manual thing. But obviously, if you're considering those, then you're probably not that worried about it. So if you're not someone who's buying a new manual Golf R, you want the DSG, 100%, I'd go for an RS3 any day for sure. That'd be a good call. Omar says, best manual truck you've driven. Manual truck. When was the last time I even drove a manual truck? It's probably at least, I don't know. Yeah, it's probably been at least 10 years. That one stumped me. I don't think. The only manual truck that jumps into my mind that I remember driving vividly was when I was a teenager working at the car dealership. There was a manual V8 Dodge Dakota that we had with a 5-speed, and that thing, it was so beat up, but it had so much torque that it was almost impossible to stall that truck. You could just basically do anything you wanted with the clutch and it just wouldn't stall, and it would always start. You could even start it in second, and it just was hilarious with how easily that thing was to drive, because it was just such a torquey setup, and that transmission was probably a little messed up as well. But I don't have really any experience with manual trucks, honestly. So it says, what are your thoughts on BMW's new designs? Not into them. I don't like any of them. And I was, I'd say it's awesome that the M3 offers the manual. And I will say that in black or maybe gray, I can tolerate the new M3 now a little bit versus, last year I was, probably wanting to vomit all over the place seeing it. But I don't know. Especially the XM and all this stuff is good grief. And even the new M2 that, everyone's been filming this week. Unfortunately, I was not on that BMW trip. They don't send me on press trips, but everyone was showing these close-up looks at the M2. And I'm like, man, I like the idea of the M2, but I still don't even like the way that looks. And that doesn't even have an enormous grille, but it's just I swear, it's like they're trying to drive people away with their styling. And if you remember in the one weekly update, one of the interviews from one of the BMW executives is like they don't want it to be appealing. They actually said they don't want it to be for everyone. Like they want it to be like this exclusive club of people that are willing to drive hideous vehicles for whatever reason. I don't know. It's just like, and again, that's subjective. So again, everyone has different thoughts. And Ciaporia says the grills are hot. So some people love it, and that's fine. But for me, since you're asking my opinion, still, I think BMW's gone off the deep end as far as the styling department goes. And I think it's got to hurt sales at some point if it hasn't already, because that's not how you sell cars, by making polarizing designs. Maybe for a sports car, if you want to really stand out and make a statement, but not for stuff you're actually trying to sell at volume. And he says BMW needs a design team. Yeah. The thing is, it's not hard. It's hard to design a car, but it's not like, I don't know. To me, like, play it safe. BMW has plenty of great, designs over the years. Go the safe conservative route and, do stuff that pays homage to that and do it in a conservative way. And they know how to do conservative stuff. They said like stuff like the X3, even the X5, they're going to keep it more conservative because they want to make sure that their bread and butter doesn't get, too repulsive for people. And so it's like they know how to make good, nice cars, but then they just choose not to with everything else for some reason. So yeah. And, other things here. So Nathan's asking, hey, Matt, ever consider getting into motorcycles? No, and this is something someone else asked in the last live stream as well. And I know it probably, a lot of car people are into bikes, and I completely understand. I've heard it's, way more exciting, way more of a rush. But for me, there's way too many distracted drivers out there these days that even if you're a perfect rider, if I'm going to have, distracted people slamming into me, I want to have metal and airbags and crumple zones. And, so that's why I don't have the guts to ride a bike. It's essentially it. To me, I think it'd be fun, but from my risk profile, it is not worth the risk to me. That's just my preference. So won't be ever doing any kind of bike stuff on the channel here. I can't remember. There's this is probably at least 7 or 8 years ago now. I did like a vlog when I was trying to like experiment with vlogs a little bit. And I had one where I rode my buddy's old like 1970 something BMW motorcycle that was really heavy. I'm not a big guy, and trying to keep that thing from like falling over when I was just trying to ride it around the yard, I ended up just like laying it down. Thankfully it was in the grass and I didn't damage anything, but it was old and it wasn't like it was pristine or anything. But that was like my one experience riding a motorcycle. I think I may have tried something else one other time, like very briefly, but yeah, just not my thing. And Omar says the i8 was a stunning car, 100%. i8 was great. A ton of beautiful BMW stuff over the years, like no doubt about it. It's just this new stuff is iffy. Avinder says, even Mercedes-Benz new designs aren't my favorite. I hate how they are trying to make all the car designs similar. Like I remember when S-Class used to stand out, now it just looks like a C-Class. Yeah. I don't know why Mercedes thought copy and pasting designs, for people that are spending double the price of a C-Class, why would they want it to look like a C-Class? I totally agree with you. Obviously, there's some prestige there, and if you're a Mercedes enthusiast, you'll be like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, there's so many differences between them. But like, yeah, I agree with you on there. I really wish they did more distinctive stuff. And this is also why, if some of you, if you watch the channel a lot, I'd probably sound like a broken record, but like, this is one of the things I really respect about like Hyundai and Kia. One, most of their designs, most people can agree, are pretty cool looking, and they're all different. Every single one of them is completely a clean sheet like design. Yes, they might share some little themes that are subtle here and there, like, the Elantra and the Tucson, for example, both have creases on the sides. But, aside from those minor things, they're all completely different designs. And to me, that takes more creativity, more skill, because you're pulling off multiple designs. And I mean, again, a lot of people don't love the styling on like the Elantra and stuff. So this is, again, one of those subjective things. But overall, just the guts to, do all these different designs and, have that creativity and have that daring ability to, do all these different, takes on something, I think is one of the reasons why I really respect, those brands, in addition to the fact that you have 110% with everything else and the way that they kind of, give you more stuff for your money most of the time and all that. And Alexander saying, yeah, the Tiger Nose Grill, the Kia does is great. Yeah, they do so well with their designs for the most part, I think. And the 1K, thanks for joining. Says, good afternoon, Matt. The Smoking Tire posted a video recently about his Mach-E and explicitly showed and discussed his difficulties with charging on a road trip from LA to Phoenix. Your thoughts? I did not see that. Matt Fair is awesome. I got to talk to him a couple of times in the past, but I don't watch his channel regularly. I don't watch most YouTube stuff. I just don't have time for it. But I think on Twitter, I saw some discussion about that. And the thing with EV charging is it is completely luck of the draw. And it depends on where you're at in the country, what time of day, what time of year. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into it. And again, it's just ultimately sometimes you're just coming down to flipping a coin. Is this charger going to work or isn't it? Again, outside of the Tesla charging network, which is, much more reliable. But as far as my thoughts on it, like we had our road trip last year and it was pretty much flawless. We only had to wait one time for a charger, and I did a video on that. I'm sure you saw about, how road tripping in a Mach-E, how bad is it or something is how I titled the video. And for us, we were really lucky, but I know like the straight pipes, every time they go to a charger, it doesn't work. There's so many other people that are like, oh, these things are all completely useless and terrible. And usually the truth is somewhere in the middle. Again, everyone has different, experiences, but typically, I would say the average experience is that it can be hit or miss. Man, there's another cat here. We got two long-haired cats and they're like, I don't know, they don't really hang out in here that much, but for some reason we got a bunch of hair just floating around here. Sorry about that. But, yeah, so that's the thing with EVs. It is certainly one of these things that's kind of up in the air. And, this is a lot of us reviewers have been saying recently, and I've said this all along, like if you road trip on a regular basis, or if you are the risk profile where either you're uncomfortable taking that risk, or you aren't the type of person that likes to plan out all your stops, you're in a rush, you're doing a cannonball run across the country and you can't stop for more than, 5 minutes. If that is the way you roll, then 100% get a plug-in hybrid if you want to have the electrified thing and have the convenience of gas. I keep saying, I've said over the past few years here, if I think the RAV4 Prime is the closest thing to a perfect vehicle for Americans right now, because it has enough electric range for basically everyone's average commutes in America. So you could basically drive it as an electric vehicle all the time. And then if you all of a sudden decide, like a lot of people say they claim they want to do, and drive across the country tomorrow, you can do that with no problems. And it really is the best of both worlds. And I think for a lot of people, I get that, the electric thing is the most popular thing, and that's the thing that's being shoved in everyone's face these days with all these new reveals and everything. But go for the plug-in hybrids. There's lots of great plug-in hybrid options, especially, again, getting back to Hyundai and Kia. They offer plug-in hybrids basically of all their most popular stuff these days. And it's a great option if you're, wanting the best of both worlds. And especially if you're someone who does a lot of road trips, go for a plug-in hybrid, or, just stick to gas. There's nothing wrong with that either. But I think plug-in hybrids really, I wish, I try to give them more publicity, but I really wish there was better marketing behind some of them. And I know Honda, they had a brilliant campaign a few years back for the Honda Clarity plug-in hybrid. So this is probably, when was this, like 2019, 2018, back when that car was still on the market, and they were actually still convinced that maybe there was some people who were interested in it. It was, it's a shame, because it's actually a pretty nice car if you just want something, to commute in. But anyway, their one commercial that was like a family on a road trip. And it was like, as the car, went across the screen through the desert or whatever, the battery would drop. And they're like, I can't remember the tagline, but it was basically like, when you run out of juice, no problem, keep on going with the gas and you fill it up. And it just, I think there needs to be more public awareness about like, hey, there's this other option. Cause I think a lot of people, they understand, okay, there's things like a Prius out there that are regular hybrid, and they understand that there's electric stuff now, thanks to Tesla and that, popularizing EVs. But a lot of people, I still think, have a blind spot about plug-in hybrids. And I think that I wish there was a bigger push for plug-in hybrids, because I really think it would be so much better from a battery standpoint with the materials and all of that as well. I think I think plug-in hybrids are kind of the way to go for the current infrastructure, the current restrictions right now, unless you're someone who doesn't road trip, then you can always charge at home. I think that's kind of where it makes the most sense. But And Copper says the main that's the main holdup for an EV, the charging network being unreliable still. And it is important to keep in mind though that they are dumping tons of money into the charging infrastructure. Everyone is doing all these new charging stations. We've been hearing announcements left and right every other week about there's this thing's pledging 2,500 new chargers, and this thing's doing another 5,000 chargers. And I mean, they're working on it. It's just to me, it's not even the amount of locations because I think that they're pretty well spread out, at least for the more heavily populated parts of America. It's just the reliability. And I don't know what they need to do from a reliability standpoint to get that fixed, but someone needs to like reverse engineer a gas pump and be like, okay, let's make it as simple as a gas pump, but we have electric come out instead of gas. Like, I don't know why they'd overcomplicate these charging stations and make them all fancy. Like, make it an old fashioned thing, like put physical switches on it if you have to, whatever you need to do to make it reliable. Go back to the drawing board on the designs of these chargers because that's the main holdup. I honestly think the number of them is already sufficient for the current demand right now. Maybe slightly under that, in some places, but they just someone needs to come up with a better design for a totally 100% reliable charging, station. And then I think that would solve a lot of problems. And Steven says, good morning, Matt. What are your top 3 classic cars you would own? You always talk about how you love classics, but what are the ultimate favorites? For me, 68 Mustang is one of the top ones. I'd also love a 55 Thunderbird. And aside from those two, I also love a lot of the classic Cadillacs from the 40s and the 50s and even the 60s. So many cool designs. The thing with classics is it's literally, I mean, they all are beautiful, honestly, in my opinion, at least most of them. It's hard. It's easier to list the ones that are ugly than it is to list the ones that are good looking because I think there's so many good things. I mean, the 57 Chevys, there's so many good ones that I would love to have someday. And there's just some that are just so creative and unique, whether it's with fins or airplane inspired elements, outside of the fins. There's just so many cool things about classics that I'd love to highlight someday. And Copper says the other thing with EVs and PHEVs is you need somewhere to charge at home to make sense. Yeah. So if you live in a complex, like you said, apartment dwellers, all that kind of stuff, that's where, again, for those people, I would certainly say, yeah, just go for a regular hybrid if you want the electrified component for now, and that'll still, save you a lot of money on gas at least. Bruce says modern car design consists of headlights being moved down to the fog light area, coupe roof lines, and light bars. What do you think about these design trends, and which trends do you think will end? I don't know. It's one of those things I every once in a while do think about. I think the coupe roof lines, I think, the people who kind of invented that stuff, the Germans, we've heard that like Mercedes is planning on getting rid of the coupe versions of their SUVs. I believe after there's going to be one more new generation, I think, after we just saw a refresh actually of the GLC coupe this week. And then I think there's going to be a new generation that will get a coupe, but then they're done after that. So I think they're either going to sunset it on their own or they're thinking that may fall out of favor. As far as the headlights being moved down to the fog light area, I think that trend is here to stay because the main driver for that is blinding people. A lot of these SUVs have these headlights up super high and it's straight in your eyes. And so if you put them down lower, then you still have the great, nighttime visibility. You still have really good road illumination, but you're not blinding everybody. And so I think, obviously, if they're really bright, they're still going to be blinding you from certain angles, but there's less chance of it than if they're up, as high as they are in, some enormous truck or something. So I think that one is here to stay, and I think it's here to stay for a good reason. The light bar trend, we'll have to wait and see. That was something that, they did that stuff in the 80s and the 90s. I remember, I think it's like, was it the Mercury Sables back then that had the illuminated bar in the middle that connected the two headlights. And there was a few others, some of the sports cars played around with that idea. And that was obviously a much shorter lived and a more limited fad, I think. But, they tried that back then, and it kind of, same thing. Digital gauge is another one, another trend. Digital gauges they were all the rage in the 80s and into the 90s as well. And then they went back to the analog thing. And I think you're starting to slowly see that a little bit with, we're seeing like even Volkswagen being like, wait a minute, maybe we don't need to do screens for everything because people are annoyed about that. We'll bring back some buttons. We just saw the ID2 this week they debuted. They're bringing back some buttons in that. Not a ton. It's still a lot of screen, but I think they're realizing that one, that's super distracting, and two, people just don't like it. And so if the consumers don't like it, then you change because that's who you're trying to please. So, I think, I've seeing a lot of the 80s and the 90s kind of making a return with the stuff we're seeing. And it's, I think, partially because they're, again, trying to do this futuristic push of making everything crazy. And then, you saw that kind of phase out in the early 2000s whenever everything went retro, whenever, especially whenever like the PT Cruiser was this viral hit and just was, everywhere. I mean, if you remember back then, you were old enough to remember and you were alive back then. I mean, it's like, when the PT Cruiser came out, was at 99, I think. I mean, they were everywhere. I even remember they were a huge phenomenon even in like Japan. It just were a place where Chrysler had a very small footprint. All of a sudden, like everyone in Japan wanted a PT Cruiser. It was like this huge thing. So I think that brought back the retro things, and then that's when you saw, all through the early 2000s there, the Mustang went retro, Camaro went retro, everyone went for the retro thing, and that kind of stuck around with the Challenger and stuff a little bit, and lingers even to this day. But I think uh some of that stuff, the futuristic, edgy stuff. I mean, yes, you could say arguably now, especially with the electric vehicles and stuff, we are in more of a futuristic, edgy kind of Tron world than we were back in the 80s when they were trying to, impart that vibe. But yeah, I don't know. I think the light bar thing, if of any of those trends, is the one that is most likely to fade out at some point. Because everyone's gonna be like, okay, we're bored. We see you have a light that goes all across the front of your vehicle. Like, try something new. And I think that's going to get old, and it's also going to get pretty generic after a while. Like, even there was a car with a light bar behind me a couple of days ago. Some of them are kind of distinctive, like the Kia Seltos. I can always tell when it's a Seltos because of the way they did it. But like, there was a Mercedes, I think it was a Mercedes EQS behind me. It was dark and I couldn't tell, but like, it had one of these light bars, and it could have been an EQS, but it could have even been something else, because it's just like, pretty soon all these new cars are gonna have a light bar going across the front, and it'll honestly make it less unique than being able to identify a unique headlight design like we used to be able to do. Um, so yeah, we'll see. It's an interesting thing to think about and see how it progresses. And like any, trend, things come and go, and old things come back and all that. So we'll see what happens. But it's fun to see how they're experimenting with that. And Angel says, "Hey Matt, I know you're a movie car fan, but can you think of a popular movie car from a recent movie, say within the last 10 years? Doesn't seem to be a thing as much." Yeah, I think that's kind of one thing that's kind of been a bummer. I mean, one car that does stand out in my mind, from like the past 10 years, was Baby Driver. The WRX in that movie, stood out to me. And as a car that, when you think about Baby Driver, I think of a WRX. Maybe it's because I'm a Subaru WRX fan, but maybe if you're someone who isn't into, the WRX, then Baby Driver, just like, oh yeah, a lot of cool car chases in that movie. But to me, like, obviously they didn't have that car in the entire movie, but that really stood out to me as like car and movie tied to one, kind of. But other stuff, I think one of the other things that is really memorable, is, I think, James Bond. They do it really well with the Aston Martins, and you think James Bond these days, you think Aston Martin. That wasn't always the case. Back in the 90s, it was BMW, and there was other brands over the years and stuff. But I think they're another one that has nailed the car integration. And obviously, some of the newer movies, it's less of a core thing than it was, Casino Royale, and especially Quantum of Solace opening with that epic car chase with the DBS, like that, to me, like, really cemented that connection a little bit more so. And so now you think James Bond, you think Aston Martin, they're synonymous almost, in my mind at least. And so I think they do a really good job. You always expect an Aston Martin in a James Bond movie. So there are some, things like that. But aside from, that's really the only two things. Let me see. I have all these movies up here. I can just do a cheat sheet here and think of other cars here. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty much it from the past 10 years that I can think of that stands out to me. But yeah, so you're right though. It's kind of a shame, and I hope they do get back to that with the new Fast and Furious. I think Vin Diesel said they're going to try and get back to the racing a little bit. I'm not going to hold my breath for that, but Alexander's also asking about Fast and Furious. Yeah, that's, I'm excited for the new movie. I will say I was pleasantly surprised with 9, because after 8, I had pretty low expectations. I didn't love 8. I thought they really kind of jumped the shark a little too much with 8. But then 9 kind of, to me, I think it was they brought back the Tokyo Drift stuff, and, brought back Han and all that stuff. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen 9 yet. But, so that's some of the stuff that I think really made 9 a little more endearing to me. And so, we'll see what they do with 10. But yeah, it's I would like to think they get back to the cars being really central. And I mean, obviously Dom always has his Charger, and that's always, kind of a key thing you can kind of count on as well. So I guess there's a little bit of that still in those movies, but that's really, pretty much it. But yeah, good question, Angela. It was really It's fun to think about. And Omar says Ford Lightning light bar is unique front and back. That's true. It is for now with the way they have the things going down the sides there with the headlights. And so I think that's the key is not just having the bar going across, but still it goes back to the headlights and them being unique, so that it stands out. And Copper says, I don't understand why Kia doesn't put all-wheel drive in the K5 GT, considering the standard one has all-wheel drive, so we know it fits the platform, and the 2.5 is paired to all-wheel drive in the Santa Fe Sorento, so the engine works too. That's true. And this is the same thing that people were saying about the Charger. And, they did do an RT all-wheel drive Charger for a few years, and then they got rid of it. And I'm not sure why they got rid of that trim, but I know Dodge has said in the past, as far as why they never did like an all-wheel drive Hellcat and things like that, is even if you can fit a rear axle for all-wheel drive and you can fit a drive shaft in there to get power to the back end in that car or any car, so like in your example of the K5 GT, a lot of times it's a clearance issue. So yes, if the all-wheel drive system, you have the all-wheel drive system from the regular K5, you have the motor, and that potentially they can pair up because they do in the Santa Fe and the Sorento, but that pairing may require more clearance. I can't remember who, I think Dodge at some point said, like, in order to get a Hellcat all-wheel drive Hellcat to work, they would have had to either lift it or have an enormous extra cutout in the shifter area to make room for the modifications of the transmission tunnel. I'm guessing that there may be some kind of thing there where you have some extra clearance with the Santa Fe and the Sorento, where you don't run into that issue because of they're higher, they're taller, they have a taller cabin. So maybe you got some extra room there to play with than you have with the K5. That's just my guess. There is, though, some spy shots of all-wheel drive in the Sonata. So maybe Hyundai will attempt that. But, for a vehicle also, you got to keep in mind as low volume as the K5 GT and the Sonata N-Line, they have very little motivation to increase the appeal of those vehicles, because I think they know how much appeal they could potentially get out of an all-wheel drive version of that. And chances are the cost of probably, like I said, doing some modifications to make it fit perfectly in that smaller car platform, I think is probably not worth it for them. And I know, like, even Toyota with the Camry and like the V6 Camry selling in such small numbers that it sounds like V6 Camrys are probably on their way out, just because there's so few. I think there's like a 7% take rate on the V6 anymore, and that was a couple of years ago. It's probably even worse these days. But there's just not much motivation there from a money standpoint, unfortunately, either. So I just think it's one of those things. It's maybe an engineering wish list, but probably will never happen, unfortunately. Tom, thank you so much, though, for the first super chat. He says, hi, Matt. I eventually want a two-door sports car, and two I have in mind is the ND2 Miata and the GR86. Which do you think is more fun, shifter, steering? So more fun, obviously, is a subjective thing. So obviously, what I can say is neither of those vehicles are bad choices. Both of them are fantastic fun. I think you will enjoy both. Obviously, a test drive will be very illuminating to help you kind of decide which will fit your definition of fun better. Personally, I would say, I'm trying to think of, so as far as shifter, Miata has the better shifter. Steering wise, I would say GR86 has the better steering, just because it's a little light sometimes on the Miata, but I'm really, really, just nitpicking here because the Miata steering is great too. So, it also comes down to how much are you going to enjoy the convertible thing. And if you're talking about, getting the hardtop version of the Miata, with the retractable roof, in that case, I would say the GR86 handles better. But if you do appreciate the convertible experience, then I'd say, go for a Miata. But if the convertible thing does nothing for you, I'd probably say GR86. It's the better handling car. It's a little more serious, but also still very playful and fun at the same time. The Miata just has lower limits than the GR86. And so that means you can approach the limits a little easier in the Miata, but the GR86 compensates for that by just having the back end fishtail out on you, whenever you provoke it even slightly. So they have, again, different types of fun. You can't really hang out the tail of a Miata as much as you can in the GR86. So again, it just goes back to different types of fun. But if you want to feel like you're going really fast when you're actually not, Miata is a great choice, though, because the Miata just has those lower limits and it's smaller as well, lighter. and you feel a little, especially with the convertible down, you feel more at one with the driving experience and just your surroundings. And that, so that would be my pick. So if it were me, it also comes down to, like, could you appreciate a back seat? If not, just go for the Miata for that as well. And GR86 is a little easier to live with extra storage spaces, a little extra interior space too. So that's something you might want to consider. But they're both great choices. So hopefully a little bit of what I said there gave you a little bit of insights. And but like I said, I'd try and test drive them if you can. But they're both so much fun. But thank you very much for the super chat, and feel free to ask any follow-up questions if you'd like. And I also feel free to also send me messages on Facebook if you want. I always go through with some other people on there as far as really drilling down more of the context of what exactly you're looking for, what you like, as far as what would be the best fit for you. But yeah, congrats on being in the market for those two, because it's a very fun decision to have to make. But Kyle, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships there. I see we already had everyone snatch those up, I think, here. So congrats to JK, Brian, Snowman, Otto, and Theo there. Thank you so much for grabbing those, and hope you guys enjoy the membership experience as well. Thank you so much, Kyle, for another membership gifting here. I know you just did one last week too. I really appreciate it, and I very much just thank you for that support, Kyle. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out. If any of you who just became members have any questions, I'll be able to answer those here with a priority answering as well. And Angel says, my vote's the GR86, test drive both, and was about to pull the trigger, but life happened and needed 4 doors. Certainly can relate. That's the way things go sometimes. Dom says, thank you, fellow members, for continuing to send gifts. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. That's so awesome. Bruce said, the Nissan IDX concept car is one of my favorites, but unfortunately it will never be put into production. Which concept cars would you like to have seen make it to production but didn't? That's a good question. I'd really have to sit down and think about that one, because there's been so many over the years. There's so many cool things that I wish got made by Mopar, all the Dodge and Chrysler stuff. They had a lot of wild concepts in the late 90s and the 2000s that I would have loved to see get made. The IDX is one of the top ones, though. I was really excited about that thing, and then when it didn't happen, that was really a bummer. I'm trying to think of other concept cars off the top of my head. I wish, in recent memory, I really wish Buick would have made the Wildcat. That actual coupe was gorgeous, super cool. I got to see it in person at the New York Auto, or at the Chicago Auto Show, last month. But it sounds like that's just gonna be we're gonna take this front end and then we're gonna put it on all of our crossovers. And it's okay, thanks anyway. But yeah, that's another one. I'm trying to think though. I'd have to sit down though to give a good answer to that question and really think about it, because there's been so many interesting things over the years. And Jay's thanking Kyle for the generosity there. And Dom says, Hyundai new car that looked old school. Chrysler ME, Broly's mentioning there. So Dom, I can't remember which one. I get what you're talking about though. The Hyundai. I can't remember the name of that thing, but the thing they just came out with, it's hydrogen, that looks like it's it looks like it's like an 80s Supra or something, but I know what you're talking about. The 74. Thank you, VQ. Yeah, that thing. Yes, we'll put that right at the top of the list. That needs to get made. That is the top request for me as far as concept cars that need to be put in production. That Hyundai 74, Vision 74 concept, definitely the way to go. So yeah, and Pat says, hi fellas, any word yet on Z production halts? I haven't heard about that. That's news to me. Let me see other things. Eric says, car manufacturers are starting to get a strong pressure from customers to still save the combustion engines, because not everyone wants to be in electric cars and trucks. Definitely. I think Toyota still, in my opinion, has the best approach. I wish Toyota had better EVs currently, but I think them going for the multi-pronged thing of here's the plug-in hybrids for those who need those, here's the hybrids for those who need those, here's the regular gas stuff for people who want no form of electrification. Offer something for everyone, and just make it compelling though, because that's the thing too, is if you phone in the hybrids and the plug-in hybrids, then of course no one's going to want them. But Toyota does really good hybrids, really good plug-in hybrids, so giving their 100% with those. And so I think that has converted a lot of people over to the hybrid stuff because they are just, so good. And I mean, people like saving gas and all that. So, but yeah, I think, giving people choices is certainly, the better way to go about it. as long as, again, we're still getting to, the goals we need to get to, with the climate stuff. But as long as that's, being met, and e-fuels is another solution potentially for that, if we want to keep the, combustion stuff around as well, to still, get towards those goals too. And Copper says a lot of the Genesis concept cars are pretty. Yeah, they definitely are as well. Yeah, the Genesis X, that's another one. Like, they did the coupe convertible and the Speedium coupe kind of thing, and the shooting brake kind of concept there, and those all, yeah, would be awesome. And I think there's talk, there was a Genesis dealer that claimed they're getting that put into production. We'll see if that turns out to be true, but that would be another one to be awesome to see. And Sandeep says, did you go to the M2 launch event? I did not. Unfortunately, BMW does not invite me on launch events, so I did not go to that. That seemed like it was really a good, efficient event, though, where they had like that, the XM, and like a few other things they were all driving too. So that would have been a good one to go to, but unfortunately did not get to go to the launch event. So, but I did have another member here, Justin. I don't think he's here today, but he offered his M2. He's getting one in here this spring, and he offered it to me. We're tentatively going to hopefully film a review on that in June, early June, and I will have an M2 review hopefully at some point thanks to him. But it will be a little bit of a wait, so I will not have something when everyone else does, when the embargo lifts on that, at some point here, the next, I don't know, few days, few weeks, whenever that embargo lifts, I'm not sure. But yeah, I would love to have been on that, but no luck, unfortunately. Copper says, talking about Toyota hybrids, any word on the Corolla Cross hybrid? Normal 23s are out. Wasn't the hybrid supposed to be out at the same time? Good question. So Toyota hasn't publicly said what's going on with their hybrid stuff, but like the Crown, they did the drive event for the Crown in October, and my brother-in-law is a Toyota salesman. They just got their first Crown in this week, and that's way too big of a lead time from October till March. It doesn't make sense to review a car 6 months before it's even available at the dealer. So something happened there with some delays. It's also strange. I was wanting to review the new Corolla hybrid with the all-wheel drive setup and stuff, and those were like missing the entire winter, which is when you want to review a new all-wheel drive vehicle. I don't know where they're at. They're still, missing for the most part. As far as your question on Corolla Cross, what I can tell you is that we are going to be driving them here at the end of this month alongside the Prius Prime. So I will have a review on the Corolla Cross in early April. Now, as far as when they show up at dealers, I don't know. I can talk to my brother-in-law again and see if they have heard anything about Corolla Cross hybrid coming anytime soon. But it's got to be soon, because yeah, it is a 23, and at this point they're running out of time. You got another 6 months tops, for 23s before you're going to expect them to have 24 badges on them. So yeah, I don't know what's going on with some of those delays on the hybrids on Toyota's side, because it's strange, because like it hasn't affected the Prius. Like that's like seems to be like right on time. So I don't know. Anyway, John, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, "What's up, Matt? Debating two cars for the summer: 2005 Chrysler Crossfire SRT6 or 2012 BMW 650i. Which would be the funnest? Thanks." That's an interesting combo. I've never driven an SRT6 Crossfire. I drove the regular Crossfire. If you want to, I don't know if you've seen my Crossfire review that I did a long time ago. I really like the Crossfire though, but if you search on the channel for, a Crossfire review, I have one. I like the Crossfire a lot. Another car that I wish kind of was more popular than it was. But 650i from 2012. See, now those, they weren't that sporty for the 650s, because you had the M6 back then, and those are more problematic with the V10. It's also a magical motor, but I'm guessing that's something you're not considering. The 650i's, I drove that generation back when I worked at BMW dealerships back around that time period, and they're fine. It just, it's kind of like an SL. They're not overly sporty. The new SLs are sporty, but the old SLs, same thing, where it's like, it was a nice comfy cruiser to go golfing in, but I don't think a 650i is really that much of an enthusiast vehicle, in my opinion. So I think the SRT6 would be the more fun choice potentially. But again, it comes down to what you prefer and what you like. But I also have to say, I would assume a Crossfire SRT6 is going to be much more collectible and probably hold its value better than a 2012 650i, which I don't think there's a whole lot of appeal on the used market for those potentially. Again, good car for sure. I know they're also kind of unreliable though for that generation. When I worked at the BMW dealer, so many of those things, they had weird phantom battery drains. And I mean, the Crossfire could be unreliable too. I don't know. But the 650i's of that generation, just I don't know. I don't have a lot of love for them personally, so I'd go Crossfire. But again, everyone's different. So, but that's my 2 cents. And thank you so much for the super chat. Um, and Dom says hybrid should be the new wave. I feel like we skipped a part of the evolution. Hi, Mitsubishi. Yeah, I think hybrids. I think Honda is going to try and do that, and Toyota's still doing that, where they're really going to push the hybrid stuff hard. And I think that again, there's no sacrifice there really, aside from for some of them having less performance. But other than that, you don't have to worry about charging stations. You don't have to worry about any kind of stuff. It's proven hybrid battery tech that's been around for the past 25 years or whatever. So I think yeah, hybrids will be a nice baby step for a lot of people. Bruce says, do you think cars in the future will have some kind of transforming feature? Well, Audi's been playing around with that recently. If you look at their, what are they called? The Atmosphere concept, and they have these new concepts. I can't remember the name of them, but where they like kind of shape shift, and they like the one goes from being like the super long coupe and it kind of shrinks down. That kind of stuff makes for good concept cars. A lot of that stuff though, I don't know how practical it is, and the extra complexity, and from a safety standpoint, as far as how do you crash test it, and there's just a lot of different things with transforming cars. I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities, I suppose, but I think it's gonna be a long time before we see anything that transforms potentially. But yeah, it's a fun question. I mean, again, a lot of other companies are playing around with it. I think BMW also was playing around with that a little bit, but I think that's kind of one of those futuristic pie in the sky things that probably will come even after self-driving cars do, which is another thing I think is a little further off than a lot of people, are making it seem. And Pat says, after the media launch, no Z's out in the wild yet. Many of us haven't seen one in person. Seems like Nissan blew production. I heard transmission issues with manual and auto was the reason. Interesting. Well, I mean, they have shown up. I mean, I talked about this thing in the last live stream too. I think part of the phenomenon is that the dealers are just holding them up, because if every single dealer is trying to get 100 grand for them, then of course none of them are going to be on the road, because they're all sitting on dealer showrooms hoping for a sucker to come and pay way too much for it. So I think there's some of that. I mean, they're at dealers. I mean, you can search inventories. I think at least there were. I don't know if those ones got bought up and then no new ones came since, but they built them. I just don't know where they all went. And some of them might just be mothballed waiting for the spring here, but I think it's one of those cars that's just being held up by markups, and so no one's buying them for that reason potentially as well. Hopefully that stuff gets corrected a little bit here, and hopefully these dealers give up on these markups at some point. But I'm not holding my breath for that either. DTS says, how is Volvo reliability? The old stuff was amazing, and I mean, those things were tanks that ran forever. New Volvo reliability, especially over the past 20 years, hasn't been great. I'd say on average, it's maybe slightly worse than the average European vehicle is in general, where a lot of them have, some electrical issues down the road, expensive maintenance items, overcomplicated things that don't need to be overcomplicated, the usual kind of European luxury stuff. But I've seen some good stuff. I've seen some good stories about Volvos lasting a good while as well. So I think also, was it Savage Geese? They had an XC90 and it had like random like leaks in the roof and things that shouldn't happen on modern production vehicles and stuff. So it might not be perfect. I'd suggest maybe pulling out, Consumer Reports or something and seeing what they say about it. But generally, my opinion of Volvo reliability, which again is kind of, not 100% sound and well-rounded, but my general impression is that they're kind of like most of the other, European stuff, where I wouldn't own one. I would lease one, and they'd be great probably for the first few years, but I don't know if I'd want to keep one or buy a 10-year-old Volvo or anything like that. So again, I could be way off base there with reality, but that's just my impression of them. So don't have the best, opinion probably, because I don't know enough about them, but yeah, that's my thoughts on Volvo reliability. And Anthony says, I think on Nissan GTR, I think pricing on Nissan GTR should be lower to encompass more buyers. Yeah, it'd be nice to see them lower the GTR pricing. I don't know. I mean, Nissan seems to be happy with it. They keep it around, so clearly it's worth keeping around and selling. And you would think they would have changed up the pricing if they thought that they needed to many years ago, but it seems like they're happy to sell, however many, a couple hundred a year possibly, and selling them at the price they're currently selling them at. I think one thing about the GTR though is it does make them exclusive. I mean, even after all of these years, a GTR is a rare sight, and so there's something to be said for that as well, to keep that prestige and that kind of mythical quality about the GTR. And so maybe they want that, and that they're okay with not selling a ton of them. I know when they introduced that generation, they went in with a super aggressive price point there. What is it, 60 grand back then? It was like the GTR was like the C8 Corvette of its time, where everyone's like, holy crap, I can get a GTR for 60 grand. And, people were all over it. And now, obviously, what was it, 15 years later now, 60 grand with inflation is closer to probably like 100 grand anyway at this point. But, I think, they did the whole volume thing for the first few years. And I think now they're just content to keep it, as this more rare thing. And VQ is saying Q50 with GTR engine would be amazing, both in value and heritage. Too bad they didn't greenlight the Eau Rouge concept. Yeah, the Eau Rouge would have been awesome. As another concept I was so excited for. It made sense. I was like, they could do something like this surely. And then they never did. I mean, the Red Sport's, a fun vehicle in its own way, but yeah, the Eau Rouge would have been awesome. And really, I think also kind of given Infinity some more clout among enthusiasts, if they did something like that. And unfortunately, that just never happened. And Pat said the Z was set to be a giant home run. I was hoping for a sport base in Rosewood. The Z only has a short lifespan. I figure 5 years tops. Was a greatest hits tribute before bowing out to electric. Yeah, I mean, it was posed to be a giant home run, but my problem, even whenever I was on the media drive, was it's only a good price point, in my opinion, unless you hate the Supra, which is fine. I know the Supra isn't perfect, and a lot of people don't like the whole BMW connection. But aside from that, it's just 51 grand for that. It's just a little pricey. And, yes, you had the 40 grand base one. But the thing with that, I mean, I guess, most people, I guess, don't mind putting in a limited slip diff on their own and doing some extra stuff to it, maybe upgrading the brakes on their own and stuff. That could potentially have been a good hit. It just, I don't know. I mean, I haven't driven the base one still, so I have no clue if it's a mess without the LSD or not. But yeah, that one could have been a hit, but the performance one I think always was going to be kind of a little bit of an uphill battle just because of the price point. If they, and I said this back then too, but if they would have, priced it at 45 for the performance even, I think it would have been a lot more interesting. And maybe these days 50 is not as bad, but you still have the Mustang for basically the same price. And now Mustang's got almost 500 horsepower, another cat hair, almost 500 horsepower, for very similar money. It's just, I don't know. It just seems, I know the Z probably handles a little bit better and it's smaller and lighter, but especially in America, it's a tough sell because everyone just wants horsepower here. So it's just, and I only got 400 and got way more from all the muscle cars. It's just, it's no doubt in my mind why they sell as many Mustangs and Challengers and Camaros as they do, and very few Zs. VQ says, hey Matt, with the STI gone, do you think Subaru should make WRX TS with the STI's DCCD transmission and suspension parts? Yeah, I mean, I guess that'd be a fine concession prize. Honestly, I'd like to see a WRX GT with a manual, instead of making that an auto only. Because I mean, that has the adaptive suspension and has, the Recaros and stuff. And why they put it only in the CVT one, I still don't know. They said they claimed it was going to be more of like a upmarket, version. And so upmarket WRX buyers want the CVT, but I still don't know if I buy that. So yeah, I mean, WRX TS would be fine. I would love to know what's really going on behind the scenes with the STI and Subaru and their choices with that stuff. It's still just really befuddles me how the STI ended up getting killed at the last minute, because we know there was prototypes out there. They were working on it. It was, not far off from being released. So I truly think that there was hidden away in the back of some warehouse in Japan. There is an STI of this new generation that just ended up getting, aborted at the last minute for some reason. But yeah, I don't know. It's honestly a TS. I guess some people would appreciate it, but for me, I think the regular WRX is a great handling vehicle for what it is. And it's just like, let everyone do everything in the aftermarket if they want to, do some of that stuff. But I know the DCCD and stuff like that's a little trickier to do, but people are going to mod them anyway. So, I guess Subaru's just happy to let people do it on their own and not provide, the extra stuff. And he says, I hope the new CEO can change some things. Yeah, me too. But it sounds like all these, Japanese car companies are shuffling CEOs recently. And I think it's all because the current or the previous CEOs were probably dragging their feet a little bit on the electric stuff. And I think, they brought in some new people, possibly. I mean, this is just my conjecture, but people who are a little more into the whole, like, hey, let's just go full EV with everything. And that is part of the driver. So I think if that's the case, if anything, you'll be expecting some type of electrified STI or WRX, more so than the regular good old fashioned STI kind of coming back. And Eric says they need to come out with more affordable performance cars without all the electric garbage in them, even come back with manual windows as well again. Yeah. And I said that in last week's live stream. Someone needs to make a car company with truly bare bones stuff. And I wish I had the means to do it myself, because I would totally, be the guinea pig for that and just put a car out there that has roll up windows and a single din basic radio in it, and just say, here you go, like, and have a double din space and say, go to Best Buy and buy a head unit for $800 or something if you want CarPlay. Otherwise, I'm selling you this car for 15 grand. Take it or leave it. And I don't know. I feel like it'd probably be, you can get new car warranty and new car financing on something super cheap and bare bones. I think it would actually be a pretty big hit. But what do I know? Bruce says, what were some of the highlights and lowlights of your most recent press car event? So the most recent one was the Dodge Hornet, which was still, the embargo for that is going to be this Wednesday. So still can't discuss driving impressions with that. So some of the highlights and lowlights with any press event, typically the thing is you're in a new place. So I'm out of my comfort zone as far as filming locations, familiarity with roads, things like that. So that's always kind of the iffy thing with those events, is trying to find a place to film that's quiet, where people aren't going to bother you, where, you have decent lighting, decent setup, all those things. That's kind of the thing. And that was also one of the things with the Hornet thing, was trying to find a good place to film and knowing, okay, when are the good roads coming up? When should I start filming? When should I stop filming? And those types of things are always some of the things. The highlights, though, are always the people, getting to, either whether it's catching up with the executives from the car companies that are there, or it's, getting to hang out with all your buddies that are also, car reviewers doing the same thing, and, sharing notes and talking about whatever's, happened recently, and just, how our channels are doing, or whatever the case is. All those types of things are fun. Just talking cars with, a bunch of other enthusiasts. It's always a lot of fun. And, it's always great. Also, we stay at nice places. We have good food, good drinks, that type of stuff is always the highlights of those trips as well. In addition to the cars are usually, enjoyable for the most part. There's very few cars these days that are truly like bad cars all around. So it's always, you have some fun driving a new car. At least for me, it's always, I'm curious, what is this car like to drive? And so it's always kind of fun to be like, okay, well, now I've checked that box in my head. I now know what this car is like to drive. And it's just kind of, I don't know, I get satisfaction out of like checking that box and being like, okay, I've conquered that car. I've figured out what it's like, what it's all about, and it's kind of a fun thing. And Dom says he's been thinking the same thing about the affordable cars. It's a business I've been looking into. Yeah, I wish I had. Well, I mean, I have some friends that have money, but no one has got pockets that deep enough to start a car company. It'd be fun to try and see what happens. But I mean, the thing is that have such small profit margins. I'm sure that's part of why car companies aren't doing that either. But it is encouraging, at least, to see like Honda bring back the LXs in the past few weeks. So they're making the CRV and the Civic a little more affordable again, and so it's good to see some of that at least. And Dawson says, shooting some love from up here in Buffalo. Thanks so much for joining, Dawson. I appreciate the comment, and hope you're doing well up there. And hopefully it's not too cold. We have a strangely cold weekend here in Pittsburgh, so it's not the greatest weather, but great for hanging out in here and watching the live stream, right? So thanks for joining. 99 Zulu says, for a cheap car, I really hope Toyota really does bring the MR2 to market. If it's as cheap as what's being reported, I think it'll be a hit. Yeah, that was fun to talk about in the weekly update a few weeks ago. It'd be a nice idea of, what does they say, like a $20,000 MR2 or something like that. It'd be cool. It'd be slow though. So in America, everyone would be complaining about how it doesn't have enough power and all that kind of stuff, but it'd be really fun to see them offer that. And Toyota is one of those companies that's cool enough that I think they could pull it off, and that they would actually be one of the few companies that would greenlight something like that for the States. But, we'll see if they end up actually doing that. Best Car has been a little iffy with their rumors and stuff, so definitely don't hold your breath for that, but it'd be really fun to see that come back. And especially if they can actually commit to something like a cheap version that does have roll up windows and manual roof and stuff, I think it'd be great. Ace of Spades, thanks for joining here in the live stream and being a member. He says Volvo V60 cross country versus Audi all road versus Subaru wagon. Which would you go with on the used market? So Subaru wagon, I'm guessing you're talking like Outback XT, right? I'd say I personally, out of those three, I like the Volvo the best. The used market thing, I would just say make sure you get it with an extended warranty if you're going to go for the Volvo. But I think the Volvo drives the best. I did do a review of a cross country a few years back. I really liked it. It was great to live with for a week. The Audi Allroad, I have not spent a week with. I drove the old generations, but I haven't driven the newest one. But Audi makes really solid stuff too. So I think either of those are great choices. The problem with any of those Subaru wagons, if you're getting them with the turbo motor, the CVT turbo combo is just not precise. It is just a guessing game of when the turbo is going to spool up, when the CVT is going to give you the amount of power you want. And it's just this whole rubber band thing that's like a back and forth, like, and then you got to like figure it out. If you watch my Outback Wilderness review or even my Outback XT review, I complained about it in that too a few years back. That would keep me out of the Subaru wagons. The non-turbo ones are doable. But if you're going for the turbo, the premium stuff that competes with the Volvo and the Audi, I'd go for the Volvo or the Audi for sure. And Dawson says, I love the Toyota is cool now. So vastly different than 15 years ago. They're really doing it right. Grab the GR86, which replaced my BRZ, and I love it. Well, congrats again on the GR86, and thanks for buying one as well and supporting the cause and not just saying you're going to buy one. Like so many other people are like, oh, I think it's great. And then, they don't buy as many as people actually talk about getting. But so glad you bought one. Great car. I'm jealous as well. I still wish I could find a way to justify having a GR86 and the Bullet at the same time because I'd love to have both. But yeah, and I love the Toyota's a fun company. Like you're saying, I think Toyota's honestly, with the amount of stuff that they have and how good their other products are, it's like, to me, like Toyota and then like Hyundai and Kia are like really my three most impressive brands these days that have really, I think, made great choices in the past few years, really impressed me with basically everything that they do. And just do really good stuff. And yeah, I'm more of a Toyota fan now than I am a Subaru fan. It's really funny how Toyota really took that mantle. It's like literally like a week after the STI got canceled, Toyota's like, ta-da, here's the GR Corolla. It's like, hello, you're my new Subaru now. Like I'm gonna, latch onto you, Toyota, because you're awesome. In addition to the GR86 and the BRZ and all that, making that happen, and just the Supra. I mean, just so many good things. I love Toyota for sure. And Cobra says, do you miss your Guard Green Mustang? I still have my 2016 Guard Green and just hit 80K on it. Hello from Houston. That's awesome. Congrats on hitting 80,000 miles on it. That's so cool. I'd be curious if you hit 80 grand, if you're are you in the EcoBoost or do you have a GT? Because, I mean, both of them can hit 80,000 miles, no problem. But I'm just curious because the EcoBoost, some of those have been a little more, those early ones are a little more iffy than the GTs. Which are solid, usually with the Coyote motor. But I do miss the Guard Green a little bit, but then I see the Bullet and then that goes away. So I love the Bullet so much more. I think what Omar mentioned earlier in the live stream, the one thing I miss from the Guard Green Mustangs with the 16 with the GT was the hood vent turn signals. That is one thing I don't have in the Bullet that I do miss a little bit. And that's basically the only thing that I miss. I think the only other thing potentially is that I had the 355 gears in my GT, and I still think the gearing in that was a little shorter than the 373s and the Bullet with the new gear ratios they put in for the 2018s and beyond. They made it a little taller. So, we were talking at the beginning of the live stream here about if I were to do some type of mods to the Bullet. That is one mod I did consider is shorter gearing. But then again, I go on a lot of highway drives and having the tall sixth gear is really nice for fuel economy. So it's another thing I probably would never do. But if I never drove the Bullet on the highway, I would consider swapping out and putting like a 410 rear gear in the Bullet instead of the 373 just to make it a little bit crazier, with the gearing. But that is the only thing. But I do miss the GT had slightly shorter gearing in my opinion. So, and so I see you have a GT as well. So yeah. And he says the hood vent turn signals still work. Well, that's good to hear. And I'm glad you're still enjoying yours. That's awesome. And Chris says, I have the chance to get a 2013 Mustang GT for 22 grand with 80,000 miles. Should I do it? I haven't been keeping up on that generation Mustang as far as whether that's a good price or not. But I will say I love the 2013 Mustang GTs. I love the styling on those. I think that was really a high point. And I almost traded in the BRZ back when I first got the BRZ, and I wish it had more power back then. I was considering swapping it for a 2013 Mustang GT, and I love them. So 22 grand, 85,000 miles. I mean, the motor, I have full confidence it'll go a good while longer if it's been taken care of well. Um, as far as whether 22 grand is a good price or not, I'm not sure, but if it looks like it's a good deal, then I would recommend it. I think they're really fun cars, and definitely is a vehicle worth owning for sure. Uh, Bruce says, if Ford were to do a bullet inspired Mach E, would you consider getting one? I don't think so. I would like to see a Mach-E with dark green paint, but I think that Steve McQueen would be rolling in his grave if they did that, and I don't know if I could condone if I could condone that. I mean, he might be rolling in his grave over a Mach-E in general, but if they did the bullet thing on that, I think that's just a bridge too far. So I don't think I would get one of those. Now, I hated the Mach-E in general when it first came out. Now I own one. So, I could change my mind if they did do something like that and they pulled all the right marketing heartstrings for me, maybe, but especially if I have, my bullet, that's the bullet and I don't need another one. So yeah, I don't think I would consider it's a funny question for sure. And I know there were some people that had talked about that on the forums and stuff. If they were to do something like that, but I don't think Ford is ever going to do that. I think also you're seeing like what they did with the new Mustangs here, where they aren't even doing any kind of retro package or anything, like they did on past generations. They're just doing the Dark Horse, and that's futuristic, and that's like harkening back to the Fox body with the gauges and stuff. So I think they're kind of trying to turn a page with the Mustang and kind of be like, okay, we did the retro thing. We did it a lot over the past 20 years. Like, let's try and move this ball forward and, look forward a little bit instead. So I don't think they're going to do any heritage stuff. And someone asked that, or a few people have asked that recently about, is the new Mustang generation going to get like, any kind of other special editions or anything like that? And if they do, I don't think they're going to be historical special editions. Maybe they'll do a California special, but beyond that, I think they're going to just try and go and kind of ditch the retro stuff in a way. The only other thing I will say potentially from, I guess, a retro standpoint now is I could envisioning seeing them doing some type of SVO Mustang, since they are going back to the Fox body thing. The EcoBoost for the new generation has no manual available. And maybe they can say, okay, well, we do know there's a few EcoBoost buyers out there that want a manual. So what if we do a new Mustang SVO? We give you the Fox body gauges, get some graphics on the side of it maybe, and then, you get the turbo motor there with a manual and the SVO maybe something like that. But aside from that, I don't think they're going to go beyond the 90s as far as going backwards with any kind of retro stuff for any of the new Mustang stuff here. And Dom says, what Camaro would you recommend that's similar to the Bullet? Well, I think, none of the Camaros have as much power as the Bullet. And it's mostly just, I guess, what you could kind of equate the Bullet to from a Camaro standpoint would be the 1LE package for the Camaro, because that gives you the wider tires, kind of like a performance package like you get on the Mustang Performance Pack Level 1s and Performance Pack Level 2 really is kind of what the LT1 is or the LE1. 1LE, it's alphabet soup with those Chevy trim packages, but the 1LE, that's what I think that kind of is closest to the Bullet. If you're looking for something similar, that'd probably be the way to do it. And Adam, thanks for joining. Says, howdy, Matt. Did you buy, lease, or Ford options your Mach-E? I did Ford options, which I love. Wish more manufacturers offer that. Curious why Ford only offers it on their two EVs. Well, I think the main appeal for the Ford options, Adam, is that it's about the tax credit typically. And I did do Ford options actually as well for that reason, for the tax credit. Otherwise, we've always leased Beth's vehicles before. So we would have probably just leased it, but the Ford options thing actually had a better incentive. I think we got, what did we get? Like $1,000 or $1,500 off because of the incentive of that. And yeah, with the Ford options, you get the kind of a lease, kind of setup, and then you get the tax credit as well. So that was the best option for us. So we did the Ford options thing. But I think it kind of just really helps with the tax credit more so than anything else, because otherwise, the lease thing would be better. And honestly, we were open to leasing the Mach-E, but they don't do, like with Volvo and a few other companies, they will actually take the $7,500 tax credit, or at least they did before everything got changed and confusing with the tax laws. But last year, a lot of companies would just take that off of the price. And so your lease was subsidized by $7,500 because that leasing credit went to, or the tax credit went to the leasing company. So it made sense. It was fair, but Ford doesn't do that. They don't give you that discount. So it was like, oh, you lease this $50,000 vehicle like any other $50,000 vehicle. If it leased like a $42,500 vehicle, then I think the leasing would have been a lot stronger. But I think for the Mach-E, it's either you buy or you do the Ford options. I think leasing doesn't make any sense for basically anybody. And the 1K said, Matt Farah told Ford to make a Mach-E LX spec with rear-wheel drive, long-range battery, Magna-Ride, and GT interior. He believes this is the best Mach-E spec. Does it sound like a good spec to you? If you're in a place where you don't need all-wheel drive, like, where he lives, totally 100%. I think that could be a fun, like, California special or something. Obviously it could be sold outside of California, but you could kind of give it that kind of marketing spin. Here, in the East Coast, no one's going to buy a rear-wheel drive Mach-E, basically. So for us, it would not, like, I would not be interested in a rear-wheel drive Mach-E personally. But I mean, it sounds like a cool combo. It's just one of those things. It's like how every journalist wants a brown manual transmission diesel wagon, and it's like no one's going to buy that aside from like automotive journalists and like 5 other people. So that kind of sounds like a journalist special to me with that, because Magna-Ride, anyone who's interested in Magna-Ride and a Mach-E is just going to go for the GT. To me, anyone who, because rear-wheel drive long range battery, like that's a quick car, but it's not fast. That Magna-Ride, I mean, it's nice having Magna-Ride just for the better ride quality, but again, I feel like if you just want a performance Mach-E, you just get for the GT. And I think what would be more worthwhile is seeing a rear-wheel drive GT. Obviously, they have to have that front motor for that amount of power output. Unfortunately, they don't have a single rear motor that can do 600 horsepower or whatever. I don't think, at least. But I think that could be the only other thing that I could see a GT buyer kind of being interested in. It's a cool idea, but yeah, I personally don't. I wouldn't expect Ford to take a suggestion like that seriously, because I can't see them selling more than 5 of the Mach-E's in that specification personally. I mean, Matt's a very smart guy, so maybe he knows more than I do about the profitability of something like that and that being actually popular. But to me, I think that would kind of be a waste of Ford's time, honestly. Unfortunately, it'd be cool, but just the reality of it is not to. I don't think it makes sense. And Caleb's asking, why do you lease? Genuinely curious. So for Beth, it made sense for her Mercedes because they offered pretty good lease rates on them, at least back pre-COVID era. They did pretty good lease deals on them, so you could get a car cheaper than buying it. And Beth also didn't drive very much, and so it was a waste. I mean, yes, you have a slightly higher resale value if you have a low mileage car you bought. But for us, it just made sense to always lease her cars because we didn't drive very much. We didn't have to worry about the mileage limitations. So like she did the super low mileage caps on those cars. Like we did like the 7,500 mile leases on the Mercedes because she put like 3,000 or 4,000 miles a year on her car. So, for us, it made sense because we didn't have to pay, the full, purchase price. We just did the lease. We had, put a few miles on it every year. It was way cheaper. And we were fine with the mileage limitations. That was basically what it came down to as far as why we did the lease. We didn't care about having the equity because she liked having a new car every few years. So we would be flipping them anyway. So it's just easier just to turn it in and get a new one and, kind of just keep going round and around. So that was always the deal for her. And so even with the Ford options plan, you do have a mileage cap on those. We ended up doing the 10,500 mileage cap for that. Just gives us a little more because we do drive a little more with our daughter now than we did before. But even still, we're fine with low mileage caps because the car sometimes sits for days on end and goes 5 miles to the store and back, and that's it. So for us, it just makes the most sense in a lot of ways. But I see, so Dom's talking about Zulu's comment about theatrical type equivalent to the Bullet would be the Bumblebee edition. That's true. Yeah. As far as historical, I'm not sure if there is one for the Camaro. Yeah, there's really not much that Chevy did from a historical standpoint with those. And Bruce says, what do you remember most about Ken Block? Just the Gymkhana stuff for me. That was, obviously I was already a big Subaru fan at that point, but it also kind of, I think, elevated the WRXs to really being like even cooler than they were before Ken Block. But I think he really did a lot to make those cars even cooler when that I didn't think was possible back then. And then he went and made them even cooler. So Those Gymkhana videos, I think, are what everyone kind of remembers the most. But obviously, he was a very impressive, driver as well outside of the Gymkhana stuff, and seemed like a great all-around guy. Unfortunately, I never had the good fortune of meeting him, but yeah, seems like was a very special guy, and really sad that we ended up losing him. And Dom says Bumblebee is a great film equivalent. I want the performance though. So yeah, that's the way to do it. Is get the honestly, any Camaro though has great performance. So, but the 1LE is definitely the way to go if you want the extra grip and stuff. Cobra Monk says after driving the MT82 Getrag 6-speed for a while, do you prefer the MT82 or the Tremec? So I think, I didn't have a ton of experience with the Tremec. I just drove the Tremec in the GT350, and then yeah, that was it. I still have yet to have a drive in a Mach 1. So I think the Tremec is clearly the better transmission, but the MT82 is fine. I don't have all the complaints with the MT82 like everyone else does. It's not perfect. It's locked me out of second gear at high RPMs a couple of times, but it's pretty rare. So MT82 is fine. The more manuals that I've been driving these days, though, the more I am highlighted. It comes to the forefront of my brain that it is definitely not the best manual out there. Like the Civic Type R manual, like that thing is so good. Like I would love to have a Honda quality transmission in the Bullet. Lots of other, really impressive manuals out there, but it's certainly not the worst either. Like I don't grind second gear in the Bullet like I did in the GR Corolla, for example. So, it's a good mid-pack transmission in my opinion, but certainly far from one of the all-time greats or anything. The Tremec is definitely the way to go, and I'd love to see. I think that's why, if you don't care about the Bullet retro stuff, go for a Mach 1 over the Bullet, because the Tremec is certainly a worthwhile upgrade for sure in that. And just a great car, I'm sure. I really hope I can get around to reviewing a Mach 1 this year. I have a couple people that offered them. It's just making the time to go for the drive and meet up with these people and film it. And Min is asking, hey, Matt, do you remember if the older Mazda and Hyundai had good full-speed adaptive cruise control? Older Mazda and Hyundai. So I'm trying to think of the oldest adaptive cruise in those cars that I remember. Their current adaptive cruise systems are fine. It's just the steering assist that's not the best in either of those systems. As far as old adaptive cruise, I don't remember very far back. I think maybe the furthest back is like the beginning of this CX-9 generation, potentially. And it was fine. I think most adaptive cruises in the past 5, I'd say in the past 5 years for sure were fine. Some of them were a little unsmooth beyond that, when everyone was kind of figuring out that tech a little bit. But I'd say most adaptive cruises work well enough, for the average person. It certainly is a nice convenience feature on road trips. But I'd say they're probably, from my foggy recollection, they're all mostly fine. I'm trying to think. There was a couple that were rough. I know Ford's early adaptive cruise systems were a little abrupt with their speed changes. And I'm trying to think of any others that weren't the best. But I feel like most of them are usually pretty okay. They all kind of did the same thing for the most part. So I think most of them are pretty good. So Dom says, thank you to all the viewers. I love seeing the Matt Maran motoring community so lively. I appreciate you guys giving all the recommendations and input and all that. Michael says, do you think they will make an all-electric Corvette? It sounds like they may someday. I mean, we know it sounds like the sedan thing and the SUV thing are going to be electric, but it sounds like the C9 is going to be gas. So, or at least probably be like an E-Ray thing, I'm guessing, and have, some electrified component as well. But they're going to do, it sounds like a V8 still in the next generation Corvette. So it might be a while for seeing an all-electric Corvette, but they also could potentially offer that C9 with an electric option if the platform could accommodate it. I don't know. But I think it's going to be a long ways off. So I don't think you should expect any kind of all-electric Corvette until the 2030s at some point, but it's kind of nice, though, to see that they're, potentially, according to the rumors and stuff, going to stick with the gas engine for the Corvette. Let me see other questions here. Marcus says, what do you think about the Ben Hardy 911 or 9 to 11 minute videos, especially when comparing 3 cars at the same time? He can be talking fast as hell. His camera can't even keep up with what he's saying. I don't think I've ever seen his videos. I'm not sure if I'm aware of his stuff. I'll have to look him up. I know. I mean, the 9 to 11 minute video idea is a great idea though, because I mean, with the TikTok generation and everything, I mean, it makes sense to get the stuff down to as short of a duration as you can. That's something I'm trying to work towards with my recent videos, trying to get closer to 20 minutes at least for mine instead of the 30 minutes that half of them used to be. So that's definitely something I think I'm going to try and do. And so it sounds like they have the right idea, but I'm not familiar with his stuff. Um, and Jeremy says, good morning, Matt. Good morning to you too. Thanks for joining, Jeremy. And thanks for being a member. Dom says, have you heard about the airless basketball? I think it could transfer into tires. Yeah, you sent me a message about that, I think, yesterday or the day before, and I responded back to you. But Michelin and I think Michelin and who else? There was Goodyear, maybe someone else is doing it, but Michelin has an airless tire that they partnered up with Chevy for the Bolt to like try them out. I think they were actually offering it as a rare option on the Bolt, if I remember correctly. They're trying to get the airless tire thing working. We'll see if it turns out to be something that ever gains traction, literally. But yeah, it's an interesting idea, and I think I don't know much about them, honestly, so I can't really say a whole lot, but it is something I know car companies are trying to work on. And it'd certainly be nice to get rid of, the worry of flat tires for sure. So I'd love to see it. Smile per Mouse says, hello, Matt. Hope you're keeping well. Have you started to see Lotus and mirrors around your local area? I have not. We do have a Lotus dealer like 15 minutes from my house, which is something I feel like very few people can say these days. Lotus dealers are super rare. I guess they always have been. But so even though I live really close to a Lotus dealer, I have not seen one. I haven't seen them on the lot. I haven't seen them driving around. And we do have a decent amount of high-end vehicles in my area. So it was funny. We went to Starbucks last weekend and we're just like waiting for our order, and a blue Lamborghini Urus just like pulls up in the drive-thru. I'm like, oh, that's a nice little surprise. I'm not a huge fan of the Urus still, but I'm just like, wow, I'm surprised to just see an Urus just kind of cruising around through the Starbucks drive-thru here. But we do have a decent amount of nice cars. So I'm expecting to see some Amiras this summer, but we'll have to see. I'm not sure what the production stuff's like on those as far as, how fast they're getting those out there, and especially here in America. So we'll have to see. But I'm excited for the Lotus. I think it's a great alternative to the Cayman, from at least on paper, and I hope that enough people buy them to warrant a Lotus keeping them around for sure. And Adam, thank you. He said, just realized I get a free member milestone chat. But I don't have a question, but here's a joke. What kind of car does a snake drive? An Anaconda. Good one. My dad would appreciate that. He loves those one-liner jokes. So I'll have to tell him that one and see what he thinks. Thanks for the joke, and thanks for being a member. And yeah, any of you who are members, I think everyone gets those recognition little badges there. You can put one of those out there, and I really appreciate the support, Adam, for 4 months. And for some of you, I know the badges say like the YouTube only lets me do like a new member badge, and then like a 2-month badge, and then a 6-month, and then a 12-month, and then 2 years and beyond. So yeah, I know that could be a good way. If any of you are curious how many months you've been a member, you can do one of those, and it'll tell you how long you've been if you're unaware. But thank you so much, Adam, for being a member. And Bruce says, we've seen car names be revived and achieve some success. Which lost car brands have the best potential to become successful again? And Adam, thank you so much. I just saw you just gifted 5 memberships there. Really appreciate that support. And any of you, if you don't have your gifting turned on, I think there's still 4 of them out there. If any of you want to grab them, go for it. Free membership for a month. It's awesome. And I love the little community we're building. And I'd also love to see in the comments here if there's any other suggestions you guys have for memberships as far as what you'd like to see. I know we talked about some exclusive videos, and I think I am actually going to do an exclusive blooper reel, because we were filming the interior review for the Kia Niro, which again, not a super exciting car, but it was a fun one. We were just kind of in a silly mood when we were filming that, and we had a lot of funny bloopers. A lot of times I just have annoying bloopers where I just like roll my eyes at myself and I'm like, oh, like, why am I not talking right? But that was actually a funny one. So I think I'm going to try and do a little exclusive video for you guys that are members there, and give you something else in addition to the community chats and the membership badges and the priority answering in here and all that. But thank you so much, Adam, for putting those memberships out there. And I believe there's still, let me see, we got 3 that were claimed. I think there's still 2 more. Anyone who doesn't have that turned on, you can get that turned on and grab those. It's it's a fun thing. And thanks so much for gifting those, Adam. I really appreciate it. I guess we have so many people in here that are members already too, that probably is dampening the grabbing of those memberships a little bit. But I'm sure someone will grab them here soon. But anyway, sorry I missed your question there, Bruce. He says, which of the lost car brands has the best potential to be successful again? There we go. Dakota grabbed one. So I think the brand that could come back, this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I think that Saturn has a huge potential. I think Saturn kind of had the right idea in the 90s. It was this very progressive new kind of thing for GM. And I don't know. I just feel like a Saturn brand would be like a great dedicated EV brand to fight Tesla head to head. And like, I thought that like if I were running GM 10 years ago and I saw what Tesla was starting to do, I would have been like, whoa, okay, let's bring back Saturn, have some other futuristic thing with that, and then do a competitor to every single Tesla on the market and do crazy out there things and have Saturn be the goofy, eccentric brand. I still think that they could still do that. I think, you have like Chevy has their limitations. They can only go so crazy with some of the Chevy stuff. Same thing, Buick, all these brands have expectations as far as what you can do with them and what customers are expecting. I feel like bringing Saturn back would be a really cool way to give GM's think tank like free roam to just be like, hey, let's just try all the crazy ideas at Saturn. And I don't know, maybe a bizarre idea, but that's the one brand that I think has potentially. I think, we're seeing all these, futuristic high-tech names. I think Saturn, obviously has the tainted view of what we remember from 25 years ago or whatever. But I think you could reinvent Saturn to be a cool new EV brand potentially. And they were one of the ones that played around with the light bar in the front. So they were ahead of the curve on that. Bring back a Saturn with a front light bar, and I don't know. I could see that being successful. Other brands that have come and gone that could be brought back. I'd love to see Pontiac. I thought Pontiac had a potential as a Dodge competitor for, they have the G8 GT. And I think that, that's another thing. Obviously, GM doesn't have a crystal ball, but if they could have gone back and kept Pontiac around, I know it was tough with the, recession and stuff back then, but they could have kept Pontiac around and just made it a Charger competitor and then done some type of new GTO that had retro stuff. And even just, they could have copied the Camaro, but just I think the Pontiac could have still had something. It is, they kind of phoned it in with the, the stuff they brought over from Australia, which was great stuff, but I think they needed to do a little more customization to it for the American market for those vehicles, and they didn't. And I think they kind of dropped the ball in the last few years with Pontiac and could have really had something there. And I see no reason why the GTO and the G8 GT, couldn't have been as successful as the Dodge stuff. If they had the same kind of marketing, the same kind of commitment, I think Pontiac could have been another Dodge. Beyond those two, I'm trying to think of other stuff. I don't know. I think that's as far as I can get without sitting down and thinking more about that. But that's a really cool question, and thanks for asking that, Bruce. I see we had the rest of the memberships snatched up there. So thank you so much again, Adam, for that. And congrats to all you new members. Let me see here some new questions from members. Shift Your Own Gears is saying thanks. Cobra agrees about Pontiac and Mrs. the Firebird. Yeah, Firebird would be another one. I mean, there's so many things Pontiac could have brought back that just would have, enthusiasts would have eaten it up. Even a Fiero, make it cool, make a small little mid-engine thing, put, a Cobalt SS motor in it, and it would have been great. I mean, just so many things they could have done. I know they kind of tried to do that with the Solstice and that failed. So maybe I'm, being stupid with my ideas here, but I don't know. And that's another vehicle. I don't know. I really want to drive a Solstice and a Saturn Sky, like the red line version. I think those vehicles have a potential to maybe someday be collectible. And if I could ever find a cheap one of those, that could be a fun little extra weekend convertible car. I don't know. I think I love the styling on both of them. I was so impressed. I mean, the interiors were terrible. They were like Cobalt interiors, but aside from that, I thought they were really cool little vehicles. I have a soft spot for a lot of the GM stuff over the years. And Jeremy says, best manual transmission in a new car that's on sale. In a new car, I would say, I mean, I haven't driven all of them, so I can't say 100% because I haven't covered everything. Like, I haven't done the new M3. But I would say probably, I'd have to say probably the Civic Type R. The new Civic Type R, I'm struggling to think of a better manual. I mean, the Tremec is really good too. So I mean, the Tremec that you'll be able to get in the Dark Horse um, is up there. Uh, what other one? Oh, okay. Now I take that back. So probably the manual in the CT4V Blackwing and the CT5V Blackwing. I think that I think that is actually the best manual that I have encountered. Yeah, Type R is close. It's very close, but the Cadillacs have a little bit of extra weight to them. They feel so good going into gear, and the shifter placement is perfect. It just falls right into your hand with the seating position, and they're such good cars. They have the rev match option and all that as well. So it's easy to master. They're very easy with the clutch and stuff. But the Type R is up there as well. I'd say it's a close tie or a very close second for the Type R transmission. But I think, in my opinion, the Cadillacs take the cake. The Blackwings, they just did such a good job with that manual. So that would be my pick. And great question as well, Jeremy. And he says a lot of them don't really come close to the S2000 gearbox. True, S2000 is one of the all-time greats, but I think the Type R comes pretty close to the greatness of the S2000 in my opinion. And Vayatsy says, can't unsee the oversized air vents on the GLB EQB after y'all mentioned it. Well, sorry for ruining that interior for you possibly with those air vents. I mean, they illuminate them. They are beautiful with all the metal they have on them and stuff. It's a very nice centerpiece for a design for an interior. But yeah, it's really crazy how we didn't really notice it, and I think Beth actually is the one who pointed it out that like the screens are actually smaller than the vents. And I'm like, wow, like that is really crazy, especially these days. So yeah, Omar saying Oldsmobile is a brand, and Oldsmobile, I think that's one of those brands that is really firmly in the past. It's literally in the name Oldsmobile. It's just like one of those things. I think they really struggled with that perception even in the 90s. People didn't want Oldsmobiles for that reason in a lot of ways, for a lot of people. So I think Oldsmobile is one of the tough ones. I mean, maybe these days, if there's a lot of the people who are, they get off my lawn, like don't change anything kind of people, maybe they would like Oldsmobile in that, mindset. But aside from that, I don't know. I feel like it's going to be tough. I think Oldsmobile will be a tough one personally. Adam says, to those asking how to grab gifted memberships within the live chat, select allow gifts or select the pinned membership gifting. You should see an allow gifts on this channel switch. There you go. Thanks for that, Adam. I really appreciate that. And Alexander says Saturn Sky look better. I agree for sure. Juan says Geo's, that's a good point. Geo is another brand. I could see Geo kind of being a cool futuristic kind of thing as well. Again, it's, tainted by the Geo Metro and stuff like that, but they sold a ton of those little things. They were really popular. They were great on gas, and it was a cheap car, I think, I could see them doing some type of new Geo that could actually be cheap and affordable and be a solid little car. That'd be great. And Eric agrees about, better leadership would have saved Pontiac. Trek says he missed the gift membership, but Matt, Toyota is buying back the GR86, looking at later 350Zs versus 370Zs. Coupe 6-speed. Have you driven both? I have not driven the refresh 350Z. I drove the original version, but I think, what do they call it? The HR or whatever for the later 350Zs. I have not driven one of those. I've heard they are much better. I like the regular 350Z though. I thought they were great. 370s were good too. I honestly think I kind of like the 350 a little bit better than the 370 in some ways. The 370 was cool with the auto rev match and stuff. They kind of actually did that before basically anybody, but it's a shame about the GR86. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, I believe he was one of the ones that the motor had an issue, and Toyota kind of resisted the warranty coverage for a bit, and then they decided to go and do the right thing and buy back the GR86, which is a shame you had to give that up. But like someone else was mentioning earlier, the Miata is also a great pick. But if you're looking for something cheaper, if you're looking at older stuff now versus the GR86, both of those cars are great. I think you can't go wrong with either one. It's just they're not the most refined. They hear a lot of road noise and things like that, but they're still very fun cars. They sound great. They have tons of aftermarket support and are really, really solid. So yeah, I'd say both are definitely, still worth owning. And Copper says, I know Jeep kind of takes the place, but I think FCA could still use a dedicated luxury brand because Jeep still has more mainstream perception. Yeah, and I think Chrysler's going to try and run with that once they finally get the rest of their lineup up and running. But it's going to be a few years before we see that. But I think that's kind of the goal with Chrysler. We'll see. I mean, they could do something higher for sure. And I think they're kind of try that with Wagoneer, and the talks of Wagoneer being the separate offshoot. We'll see how that materializes and if that does materialize. But that's the other thing. But yeah, I can certainly see them, because it is kind of tough. Like Jeep has this Wagoneer, but it's priced like an Escalade. It's like Jeep, Cadillac. I mean, it is kind of an uphill battle for that. So I can certainly see, yeah, there being some value in a new brand for FCA or Stellantis now. And Shifter on Gears says, sad to see GM close the Holden division in 2020. Owned a G8 in the past and was a great vehicle for the time. Loved watching your SS videos. That black Tom Henry tune variant sounded awesome. Yeah. Those cars were so good. It's still, I mean, even to this day, I mean, even with the wide body version of the Charger, the SS, and I'm assuming the G8 as well, both handled better than even that wide body Charger, in my opinion. Such good handling cars. Holden did such good stuff. And yeah, it's really a shame what ended up happening with Holden. And Bruce says, which cars do you think have an underrated interior design? And you got some good questions today, Bruce. Underrated interior design. I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know. I really appreciate the new Kia thing they've been doing with the Niro and the Sportage and stuff. We talked about it in the Sportage interior review, where you have like the switchable little row of buttons, capacitive touch buttons that do both the volume and also the climate. It's a little annoying. So I'm not saying I love it, but I commend them for being creative and doing something new, which you don't see a whole lot of in interiors these days. And so that is one thing I think kind of is a little bit underrated, and I think they should kind of promote a little more. Like, hey, look at these cool creative things that we're doing. And they also have like the little foldaway cup holders in those, and all these other good little ideas. But there's nothing that jumps to my mind, Bruce, as far as stuff that like is super underrated that I wish wasn't so underrated. I think and that's what I try and do in the interior reviews, is try and highlight those things, so to make at least get a little more awareness out there about who's doing really good interiors these days and who isn't. Copper says, still don't understand why Mercedes with the older infotainment like the GLB doesn't have full screen CarPlay. Cheapens the look for me. Yeah. Yeah, the older infotainment. I thought the GLB. I actually didn't use CarPlay this whenever I had the GLB, the EQB over the past few weeks, because it's just, if it's not wireless, like I very rarely I'm gonna okay, I'm gonna plug in my phone unless it's a long drive, and I didn't do any long drives in the EQB, so I didn't need the CarPlay really. But I thought they went full screen with those now, unless there's maybe a little side thing or something. But yeah, there's pros and cons of that, because some people like having the other baked-in controls still on the screen there. Other people just want to have it be an iPad and that's it. So I mean, I can see the draw for both, but it'd be nice to just give people the option of having either one. And Brian is first question here as a member, says, how is the Ford Mustang Bullet doing? It's doing great. I'll be doing a video here on it at least by July, if not sooner, because July is when it will be 5 years with the Bullet. It's crazy to think that it's already been almost 5 years with that car. And it's doing great. It had a weird little hiccup, and I'm gonna save all the details because it's kind of a little bit of a long story, but it had a weird hiccup where it went into not a limp mode, but it did have this weird thing where it kind of went into a compromised state for a little bit, where it just wasn't driving right, and it was just a key cycle, and then it was fine. So again, I'll explain more in my 5-year video on that, but there's a strange little thing, never came back since, so I'm not overly concerned about it. It did have, for the second time ever, whenever I was driving home from the grocery store like a week or two ago, the gauges just went blank. Just like someone unplugged them for a split second and then plugged it back in like 3 seconds later. And that only happened to me one other time. I think it was in like the first year of ownership when I was on a road trip. And that was actually kind of scary because I was a few hundred miles from home on that instance, where I'm just driving down the highway, just cruise, and all of a sudden no gauges anymore. And that's one of the downsides of these digital gauges, is there is nothing there. If that screen goes out or connection goes out or whatever, like, you don't have any gauges. And like, even back then I was like, man, well, I'm really glad I was paying attention to how much gas I had, because like I have no gas gauge anymore. And like, thankfully it came back on like 5 seconds later, but I mean, it makes your heart skip a beat whenever that happens. And so it happened again. And and just going home from the grocery. But again, like 3-second thing, and then it was done. So don't know why. And it doesn't seem like there's anything that provokes it. It's not like it happens every time I hit a hard bump or anything. It just no random reason. I don't know if just the chip gets overwhelmed and just has to reboot itself or what the case is, but at least it's always very short-lived, very quick, and very rare. So, but this is one of the reasons why I'd like to eventually buy a bunch of new old stock stuff and like buy 1 or 2 spare gauge clusters if I actually plan to keep this car forever, buy 1 or 2 extra sync displays, because those I'm sure will go out at some point. There's electronics, the only things that are a little iffy about, that kind of stuff. But yeah, otherwise doing great though. I love it. It just passed 18,500 miles, and I just wish I had more time to drive it. That's the only thing. So hopefully I'll get to drive it some more this year. Hopefully gas prices don't shoot through the roof again this summer, and I can actually drive it without having to, empty my entire wallet to fill it up. So that's it. It's doing great. And so anyway, we only have about a minute left here. So I guess we'll go here. The last comment here from Trek is saying, thanks for the advice, Matt. Definitely going to miss the 86. Really fell in love with it so much more than the Golf R I had prior, but I am graduating college and could use the money, so I can't complain. Totally understand. Hopefully you can get into another 86 at some point, because obviously, you had a bad one, but they're not all bad. It seems like they're having a few people that had motor issues, but I think, they should be pretty solid otherwise. Hopefully you get a chance to get one that's a little more solid down the road someday. I totally understand, having to give up a car for money. I've done that in the past as well, where that's why I couldn't afford the BRZ anymore back then. And I had to, get something cheaper for that reason. So I totally can relate. It's not fun, but it's one of those things you got to do sometimes. And so anyway, I see Alexander has one last question I'll answer here, and then we'll go. But he says, hey, sorry, conspiracy theory here, but is the reason the Teslas don't get CarPlay and Android Auto is due to hacking? I don't know. I mean, I wish that Elon, gave some kind of reasoning as to why they don't do that. All their cars are so connected anyway, though. I feel like you can hack a Tesla in other ways, or they're all electronic. It'd be different if the Tesla had, a CD player and, no electronics or something, but it's an electric car that has all kinds of GPS and stuff. Like, I feel like you could still hack a Tesla just as easily. So I don't know. I'm not very knowledgeable when it comes to hacking and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know. And I know Hyundai and Kia, there's been talks that that's why they don't have wireless CarPlay, but they still have regular CarPlay. So I don't buy that for their reason either. So I don't know. It's kind of weird with who has CarPlay and who doesn't, but it seems like most do these days. So anyway, but thank you all for joining here for this live stream. We'll do another one here next week, and you guys are going to be in for 2 different car reviews this week. I'm going to be doing the Nissan Altima. We'll be posting that one on Monday here, and Wednesday I will finally be posting my review on the Dodge Dart. So stay tuned for that for all of my thoughts on the Dodge Dart and all the positives and negatives and everything in between. That video will cover everything, so stay tuned for that. Hope you guys all have a great week as well. Thank you all so much for joining this live stream. Thank you especially to those of you who did the super chats and the membership gifting. And for all the members who joined, I hope you're enjoying that. And anyway, thank you all very much once again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.